Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we're talking the 2013 Best Actress race at the Academy Awards, where Cate Blanchett won for her performance in Blue Jasmine. But why did she beat fellow nominees Amy Adams, Sandra Bullock, Judi Dench, and Meryl Streep? We'll explore all this and more today on And the Runner-Up Is. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I am your host, Kevin Jacobson, here to talk about the 86th year of Best Actress at the Oscars, which cover the films of 2013. We'll be discussing how Cate Blanchett won, why the losers lost, and who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. And my guest today is officially my first three-timer on the Best Actress series, and is always such a pleasure to have on the show for a, thorough breakdown of Best Actress. Always does her research. You last heard her on the main show covering the iconic lineup of 1974, and previously on the 1937 episode, associate editor at Awards Watch and co-host of the Oscar Wild podcast. Welcome back, Sophia Ciminello.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me back. The Three Timers Club.
Yeah.
I'm like Katharine Hepburn, Frances McDormand. I will try to be as unhinged and unpredictable. We will see.
Well, unlike Katharine Hepburn, you actually showed up, so I appreciate that.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you know what? I did make the effort. I do have some good trousers on, though, so that's why I'm emulating her today.
Yeah. I suppose you are more like Frances McDormand and just kind of, showing up in casual, but you're still here. So,
yep, Berks, showing up in the Berks, ready to go.
Perfect. All right. Well, before we talk 2013, let's talk Best Actress as a category. So, again, as my first three-timer here, you have already answered your favorite Best Actress win, which is, of course, Vivien Leigh. You've told me your favorite lineup in this category was actually 1974, and the more I look back on it, it's hard to argue with that. But have to ask you a third question here. So because we're almost at the end and we're kind of looking forward to the future soon, curious to know from you, who is an actress that you think will win the Oscar for Best Actress someday?
This is such a fun question. I, at first, was thinking of some obvious names. Margot Robbie, Saoirse Ronan, people who've been recognized many times. They're young, they're blonde, the industry likes them. But then I decided I'm going to pivot a little bit. We're going to do some gambles. So people who I think, if I had to lightly bet on it, not a lot of money, but who I think really could win one day. I'm going to go, my first one is Lupita Nyong'o. I know she already has a supporting actress Oscar.
Yeah. Yep.
But she, I think, is someone who has been choosing really interesting projects and who always elevates her material. So something like A Quiet Place Day One, that should not work as well as it does, but it does because of her performance. And I think all of her performances, even like this year, her voice acting in The Wild Robot or going into horror with Us, which I thought she should have been nominated for that. But she has this, I think, understated quality, but also she's classically trained. And I'm envisioning her to have some sort of role like a Tar or something that is all hers that she can own one day that I think will give her a Best Actress Oscar. And I would love to see it. And then my other one who I think could do it, and this honestly could fit into the next question too, but I'm saying Carrie Coon will win one day. I know she hasn't even been nominated, but my Ohio girl is always fantastic. And she's taking these roles that I think have just kind of, I don't know, they haven't amounted to much in terms of awards, but on paper and even in practice, when you're watching them, you think that could have been a Best Actress nomination in another era, or why didn't this pan out? And I think it's just going to click in for her one day. And one of these dramatic performances, which she's so good at, are going to give her a win.
Wow. Both would be incredible. And I hope that we can look back on this someday and be like, wow,
I hope so.
Her mind. Lupita is an excellent pick because I also think she does have a lot of respect in the industry, and especially for those choices. And she's been very intentional in her choices in that way. So yeah, really hope for that. But Carrie Coon, I don't know why this came to mind as you said it, but I could definitely see just like a super like undeniable powerhouse, almost like Shirley Booth type of thing.
Yes.
Where it's just
oh my God.
maybe she's not the classic sort of leading lady necessarily, but you just have to respect what she's putting on the screen here. Or a Jenna Rollins type in a way, because she really, really, whenever I see her in things like, His Three Daughters, most recently, I just think of how incredible she would have been in a John Cassavetes film.
She's made for it. So let's make this happen. I have faith.
I do too. Wow. Okay. Well, my other question for you, you told me your most heartbreaking loss in this category was Judy Garland for A Star is Born. And your most heartbreaking snub was, and I love this pick, Shelley Duvall for Three Women. An amazing choice. But for my question for you on this, it's who do you want to win Best Actress that hasn't already? And maybe it's heartbreaking, perhaps, that they haven't yet.
Right. And I did go with 2 heartbreaking loss options here. Obviously, like Carrie Coon and Lupita Nyong'o would have been great choices for this question too. But here I wanted to think about people who didn't have an Oscar at all. So have not won in supporting or lead, obviously, but who have been nominated and who've maybe come close to winning for this and who I genuinely love. And I have to say, my answer to the most heartbreaking loss question has changed in the past year. And that is Lily Gladstone losing to Emma Stone for Poor Things. Yeah. I was so disappointed in that. I thought it was just like a really sad moment in Oscar history, really, for me, even though it's so recent. And I love Lily Gladstone and her work. I think she just always impresses. Even with Fancy Dance, which I just watched a few months ago, I think the way she communicates grief is just pretty astounding. And I love her and I want her to win one day because I think she did come so close.
Oh, yeah.
And she just lost to a louder performance and an industry favorite. So disappointing, but I think I want her to win one day. And then my other choice is, I think, one of our greatest working actresses, maybe the best, who doesn't have an Oscar for me. And I wanted to think of someone who works with a lot of international directors and who does a lot of performances not in English, and that's Isabelle Huppert. I would love to see her win, of course. And I'm also just selfishly thinking of whose campaign I want to see, whose speeches I want to see. And we know that she's also, like, if she won Best Actress, it would not be for a biopic. It would not be Oscar bait. It would be something very off kilter and a little strange. And I think we need more of that in the category. So I'm going to say Lily Gladstone and Isabelle Huppert.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we have been getting those off kilter, strange performances winning, like Michelle Yeoh and Emma Stone to a certain extent. Yeah. So now more than ever, we could very well see Best Actress winner Isabelle Huppert. So yeah, and definitely, absolutely co-sign. I was fully heartbroken to see Lily Gladstone lose that, especially because SAG kind of taunted us by presenting some false hope a little bit there. And I will forgive you for not saying Glenn Close.
I am saving it for you because I just feel like with 2018 coming around, you're just, yeah. I obviously would love her to win, and I still am one of those people who think that she can. I don't think it's over yet.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Keep hope alive.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about this year at the Oscars, the 86th Academy Awards. The nominees were Amy Adams in American Hustle, Cate Blanchett in Blue Jasmine, Sandra Bullock in Gravity, Judi Dench in Philomena, and Meryl Streep in August, Osage County, with the winner being Cate Blanchett. So before we break down these performances, first of all, I know your thoughts on Cate, so I'm excited to get into that, but what are your overall thoughts on this lineup?
Yeah, so as my favorite living actor Daniel Day-Lewis says, we have 5 sublimely gifted women nominated for Best Actress. I love that you picked this year for me because he presented. I mean, that's not the reason why, but I love the little tie-in. And it's fun, I think, for this year to talk about because, with 1937 and 1974, I obviously wasn't alive at that time. So doing the research on those years was so much fun, but it's just such a different experience, I think, when you're actually living through the Oscar year and you can look back on it, right? So you have that historical lens that you can use, but you also remember, I remember how I felt in 2013 and in 2014 about these women. And I was actually following the Oscars at this time, I would say with a lot of vigor. I had an Oscar party that year. I remember my co-host Nick was all in on Gravity, and I was not. One of our early disagreements, I would say. And I saw all of these movies in theaters, and I remember who I liked, who I was rooting for, how I felt about the end result. I'll share more on that later. But yeah, I think this will be fun. And I think at the time, too, what's really cool is that separate from 1937 and 1974, right? I had my own opinions about all of these actresses really before I saw their movies. So I had that existing context of their work and then experienced it in real time and then got to process the result, which I think will be really fun to talk about. But yeah, I think this is such a strong group of actresses, especially right for the early 2010s. If we're thinking about who was really big at the time, but also who had Oscar success so far, who were really familiar faces. I mean, we're going to be talking about some of, I think, the greatest actresses alive, which is really, really cool. And I think the fun part of this, too, will be that the films and the performances, despite the actresses being wonderful, are such a mixed bag. It really is. We're all over the place, right? With 74, I remember saying, oh, all of these movies are great. It's there's the lowest rating I would give is maybe 4 stars. And here we have some doozies and also films that I've changed my opinion on over time, which I think will be fun to talk about.
Oh, yes. Same for me. Yeah, this is definitely a fun lineup. And these are actually, for the most part, going to be really fun performances to discuss because I feel like maybe outside of Sandra Bullock, all of them really play with comedy and drama territory here, and I think a lot of them really nail both of those tones really well and create very, very distinct characters. So I like that. I like that it's not all heavy drama. Right. It's also a lineup with a lot of familiar faces, not only as actresses, but specifically to the Oscars. This is Amy Adams' 5th nomination. This is Cate Blanchett's 6th nomination, Judi Dench's 7th nomination, and Meryl Streep's 18th nomination. and then Sandra Bullock, this is her 2nd, but she's also a relatively recent Best Actress winner. So it's it's an all-star team we got here. And for the 5 we're going to and have talked about multiple times, Amy Adams, the only introduction for this episode. So that might be a little disappointing that we don't have a lot of freshness here necessarily, but I do think this lineup also does show just the longevity of all of their careers and how they've sustained through decades and decades and continue getting great work year after year. So yeah, really exciting. Excited to see whether we think these are some of the best performances of their careers necessarily, because people have differing opinions, and also intrigued to see who we say is the runner-up because, we have a winner who absolutely decimated the competition all season long, so it wasn't even really a race to the end. But there has to be a second place, so we'll see who we think it is.
I know. That'll be interesting. I was thinking about that as I was prepping for this. There aren't really many signs, and we'll get into that because the Cate domination was clear and very exciting. Yeah.
Okay. Well, shall we get into this? We're starting off with a doozy.
Let's do it.
Okay. Here we go. Our first nominee here is Amy Adams in American Hustle. Yeah, this is a rarity for this show because this is an introduction to Amy Adams for the Best Actress category, but she is already a 4-time Oscar nominee before this, with all of her nominations prior to American Hustle coming in Supporting Actress. So, yeah, like I said, she'll be our only introduction for this episode, but certainly no stranger to the Oscars by this point. Amy Adams was actually born in Italy. She was kind of an army brat, so she moved around a lot, and her family eventually settled in Colorado, and she and her family did little amateur skits and plays together. Eventually, she got involved in dinner theater through the mid-90s, and she made her film debut in Drop Dead Gorgeous in 1999. She had a small but memorable role in Catch Me If You Can a few years later, and 2005 was kind of her breakthrough year where she appeared in a few episodes of The Office, and she was hailed for her standout performance in Junebug, a little indie movie that got her a Critics' Choice Award among many other critics' prizes and her first Oscar nomination. A few years later, she had her big lead moment with Enchanted, which got her more accolades, but not an Oscar nomination, sadly. Definitely did help her cement her as a leading lady, though, while still taking plenty of the supporting parts. She got second Oscar nomination for Doubt. She co-starred in Julie and Julia. She got her third nomination for The Fighter, her fourth for The Master. So really becoming a perennial nominee and unfortunately a perennial bridesmaid. But 2013 is a pretty big year for her too, where she not only had American Hustle, but she also made her debut as Lois Lane in Man of Steel, and she had a supporting part in Her, so she's really kind of reaching the apex here. And American Hustle is her reuniting with David O. Russell after The Fighter, and this is kind of like, I mean, this is sort of like an all-stars edition of this era of his career where he's like combining Adams and Christian Bale from The Fighter with Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence from Silver Linings and making, you know, this big, bloated, you know, more complex period piece here. So American Hustle is inspired by a real-life operation from the 70s into the 80s called Abscam, which involved politicians who accepted bribes for political favors. This is loosely inspired by that. As we see in the opening title card disclaimer thing, some of this actually happened. Very winky. So definitely not a direct recreation that we have here. Very much playing loose with the facts, but the film is about two con artists, Irving Rosenfeld, played by Christian Bale, and Sidney Prosser, played by Amy Adams, who hook up and become professional partners. At first, they're doing loan scams, with Sidney taking on this other alias as an English aristocrat named Lady Edith Greensley, but it's soon found out by the FBI agent Richie DeMasso, Bradley Cooper, who then involves the two of them in a scheme to implement this sting operation to take down these corrupt politicians. I don't want to get too in the weeds with all the details of the plan, but there's a lot of scamming and double-crossing, and we see how Sidney kind of finds herself torn between Irving and Richie, who she is taking a liking to, and resenting Irving for not wanting to divorce his rather unstable wife, Rosalind, played by Jennifer Lawrence. So yes, big introduction there, but let's talk about everything here. Tell me your thoughts on Amy Adams as an actress, your thoughts on American Hustle then and now, because I know that has changed, but because we have a similar relationship to it in that respect. But yeah, thoughts on her and her performance here.
Yeah, so I love Amy Adams. I think the conversation that we'll have about her awards and her star power when we get to the Twitter questions will be interesting, mostly because I think a lot of it is wrapped up in this perception of her as the bridesmaid, never the bride, as someone who's never won an Oscar or is underappreciated, or now I think as someone who doesn't select strong roles anymore, and what that means. I think that's interesting. And I know this isn't a TV podcast and this might be sacrilege, but her performance in Sharp Objects is one of my favorites. I think she completely nailed that character, and those types of performances I think are really her sweet spot. She's best, I think, when she can dig into quote unquote unlikable women, whether they're a bit more fragile or withholding or a bit Machiavellian, like a Lady Macbeth type in The Master. I think there are such great roles for women in TV. So while I'd love her to have another great meaty film role, I think she should take another prestige TV series if it comes along. And I think with her, so with this movie, I really liked it when I was 20. I'm saying that just because, when it came out, I think I just remember feeling like it was fun and it was honestly like really well made and important. Like it felt like I was watching a 70s movie to me at that time. But now I think, that I've written about and thought much more critically about the films of the 1970s, about Scorsese films, it's impossible really not to see this as pastiche, totally. And I still understand why I liked it then. On rewatch, I still do find parts of it entertaining. And I think if we're thinking of Scorsese ripoffs, it's nowhere near as creatively bankrupt as something like Joker, I would say. But there are certain scenes, again, and moments that are fun and enjoyable. But what I got when I started thinking about it, it reminded me of like Amanda, Cameron Diaz's character in The Holiday, how she cuts trailers, and there's that like James Franco, Lindsay Lohan movie. I feel like this is a fake movie that she would cut a trailer of. That's how I just started thinking of it. Like it just doesn't totally feel like a real movie to me.
Yeah.
Just from the opening of like some of this actually happened. It's just hard for me not to roll my eyes at all of that. Mm-hmm. But what I will say is, for me watching it, Amy Adams was the standout in the movie. She gave my favorite performance, and I think it is a really tricky role because it is a sort of like a nesting doll performance. It's a performance within a performance within a performance. Mm-hmm. And she's playing these multiple characters or versions of herself. One that she puts on for Irving, one that she puts on for Richie, and then also I think how she feels about all of that, which I think is a little bit muddled in the screenplay, and we can talk about that. But yeah, I think the movie on the whole just didn't work for me on this rewatch. It just doesn't work for me anymore. But Amy Adams, her performance, I think, was the one thing that I was interested in. And viewing it, I think, through the lens of that performance or focusing on that performance did help me get through this long movie.
Yeah, and it is the longest movie here by quite some measure. Yeah, I understand all that, and I'm in a pretty similar boat. I mean, Amy Adams is someone I've always had a fondness for, especially for her work in the 2000s. Like, she has such an endearing screen presence, and also just, like, such a calm presence. I don't know how else to describe it. She just seems, like, so grounded for someone who's been in the business for, like, 20, 30 years by now. Maybe it's her Mormon upbringing, I don't know. But it's, like, she's so good at playing the good girl or like the naive girl, which she obviously did so well in Enchanted and Catch Me If You Can. And that's what makes it fun to see her working with slightly darker or nastier or just like mature material, like even in The Fighter, for example, or especially The Master, definitely in Sharp Objects. And I think American Hustle was an exciting challenge for her to be sexy and confident and duplicitous and all that. And I remember really loving American Hustle when it first came out, especially the style of it and the sort of manic energy and how fun everyone seemed to be having in these roles. And I really enjoyed just seeing her in that light. But I have found that every subsequent rewatch over the years, I have become less enchanted by it. And
there you go.
Right? Yeah. and definitely I'm seeing the hollowness that a lot of its early critics were talking about. I find that it feels like it is like way more interested in the relationship between these characters more so than the plot itself, which gets very convoluted and feels like it was kind of assembled together in the editing room, quite frankly, but still, having a bunch of things sort of missing at the same time. And obviously it's fine to have it be more focused on the characters, and I tend to prefer those kinds of stories anyway, but even on that level, I feel like there's something a little missing here, especially when it comes to Sydney, and there are times where she starts to just kind of feel defined by the men in her life more than anything else, and doesn't have much going on other than that. Like, we get a little bit of insight, I think, into like who she was before this in the beginning, but after a while, she just starts to feel secondary. And what she does get is very like stereotypical love triangle stuff and this totally misplaced anger towards Rosalind. And so I don't think she's giving a bad performance, but I do think the film is just not doing her any favors in trying to craft a coherent character, quite frankly, and not really placing the emotional through line ultimately. It's kind of just like vibes and style. And there are elements of the performance I do like and I think are intentional. But I don't know, when I watch it again, I couldn't help but like see the seams and how the film was sort of stitched together within an inch of its life, probably. And she's definitely putting up a valiant effort. And I don't want to put her in the boat of being responsible for why it doesn't work, because it's just that I think ultimately the screenplay is what is not sustaining what it is she's trying to do, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree. And it was making me think of, you know, movies that were actually made in the 70s, of what I would like to see her do. And like, if you could bend time and rework it, I just was thinking, like, what would it be like if she was in a Sidney Lumet movie or a Robert Altman movie, Alan J. Pakula? Like, if this character was in something made by one of them, it would feel totally different, because I do love her in this time period. I actually think she fits really well. The screenplay, though, like the writing it makes it really tough. And I was thinking too a lot about how you never really feel like you know her in the movie. And sometimes I think in films that are dealing with ambiguity or, you know, shifty characters, that can really work, but you have to have the writing there to back it up, right? Like, you never know how she feels, but it's not because she's enigmatic, like Faye Dunaway in Chinatown, for instance. It's because it's underwritten. Yeah. Which is a shame.
Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, I don't know if this is the right time to bring this in, but I do want to contextualize how difficult it was for Amy on the set and working with David O. Russell, who like apparently did a lot of screaming, and it was just like really intense and not something that really gelled with her. I found the quote from GQ interview she had in 2016 where she said, "He was hard on me, that's for sure. It was a lot. I was really just devastated on set. I mean, not every day, but most." And then she went on to talk about Jennifer Lawrence doesn't take any of it on. She's Teflon, and I am not Teflon. But I also don't like to see other people treated badly. It's not okay with me. Life to me is more important than movies. It really taught me how to separate work and home, because I was like, I cannot bring this experience home with me to my daughter. And just having that in mind and rewatching it again, I kind of felt that slight tension there a little bit, you know?
Yeah, and I read that GQ article too, and she also brings up the pay gap and how she knew she was paid less than her male co-stars. And to me, that was frustrating, because I think she carries the movie. So it's, you know, it's one of those things. But again, how she talks about like how she didn't know how to bring that up or how to address that at the time, especially in such a hostile environment. And I have to say, Christian Bale, come on, what are you doing? He talks about mediating fights between them, and yet he's still working with this man. It makes makes me wonder. Yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah. So that's just something that I would, you know, have in mind as I was rewatching it. And so that is tough for me. But I do want to, again, not have it focus on that aspect of it and just talk about what she is providing beyond the limitations that were here. So I'll say, first of all, like, she looks like $1 million, just like the glamour and the poise, like she's got all of that, and especially that 70s glamour that you mentioned. Yeah, there's something like, I don't know how else to explain it, but there's like a slight chilliness in her kind of model poses, like at the beginning when she's like looking at Irving and all that, and it feels like this woman who's definitely had to like reinvent herself many times and knows what she's doing, but like each reinvention has kind of made her a little bit emptier inside, which I don't know if that's reading into it too much, I don't know, but I do think there is an intentional sort of self-consciousness in the performance that is not necessarily just Amy Adams not knowing what to do, which I'm sure there are parts in the experience that she may have felt that way, but I think it is part of the character that she is intentionally not always like seeming believable, because that's kind of just like inherent in the theme.
Yeah, and I don't think that's reading into it too much, because I do think there are bits of evidence in her performance of that sort of emptiness and the evolution. I love actually the first shot of her. She is this like 70s vixen type. She has perfect hair. She reminded me a lot of like a retro Bond girl, or like she would have been in Charlie's Angels, which I loved. I think those just visual references, whether they were intentional or not, or just popped up in my mind. I did enjoy that. But there's a little flash in her eyes where she looks just a little bit unmoored. Like there's something in there that doesn't match the physical nature or what we're actually seeing in terms of her costumes or hair and makeup. And that was interesting. And seeing that look in her eyes, I think so early on, and then hearing the British accent, the Lady Edith Greensley, that I think is an interesting way for her to introduce that character. And yeah, I think it just, again, the whole time I just kept wishing like, I just wish this was a better script, because she has something there. I think that she is desperately trying to communicate. And she has that line too, where she says like, I was broke, I was fearless, I had nothing to lose. And that's such a core pillar, I think, of her performance and of the character. Not something, again, that you understand through the ridiculous editing or writing, but through what she is putting out there in the performance, and that she's trying. You feel, I think, that desperation within her, especially early, that she's really good at this. She's very savvy, and she's going to use those skills to try to do something else, really anything else.
Exactly. Yeah. And I also think her chemistry with Christian Bale is believable, and you definitely see what they see in each other. That sort of shared love of the game almost, and just like the pursuit, and they're using their smarts to, manipulate people. And like we were kind of saying there, this shared sense of feeling like loners in a way, especially her, because he does have a wife and kid, and that's what kind of gets in the way of their relationship ultimately. And I think despite the messiness of the characterization at times, I think, one scene that she is really great in is when she's confronting Irving about having a wife and kid, which, Rosalind is basically like blackmailing him into staying with her, basically. But for Sydney, she kind of assumes that he's just never going to leave Rosalind, and that eventually he'll leave Sydney behind. And she also just feels duped into believing that what they had was real, and that the idea of duping each other was kind of like off limits in a way. And I think her vulnerability in that scene really helps to ground it in showing how this just feels like an ultimate, like, crossing the line sort of betrayal. But there's also, at the same time, a drive to Sydney and a cleverness. So it's like her immediate next idea within that scene is to manipulate Richie, who she is like taunting Irving with by like saying that she may even like him. And there's like this spark in her eye, I think, that makes you kind of root for her most of all within this whole convoluted plot,
Yeah. It's so frustrating. I think that it does really solely focus on her relationships with men and her experience in this love triangle. And then she doesn't really have any relationships with women. And the ones that do exist are, I mean, not great.
She's not a girl's girl, apparently.
She's apparently not. I think that's how David O. Russell probably sees this character and sees Sydney. But I do, I think, I still love those moments in her performance, like in the scene you were talking about, when she says something to the effect of like, this works on Rosalind, this is not me, right? Like I'm different, that I'm not going to put up with this, basically. And her relationship with Richie too, I do love how manipulative she is with him. There's this amazing look in her eyes when he tells her he likes her. It's just a quick flash, but it says, I've got him. Like it's good. Now I have this person who I can put in my back pocket and completely manipulate.
I love it. Yeah. Her chemistry with Bradley, I think, is even stronger, quite frankly. And I would like to see them, maybe pair up again at some point in their career.
Yeah.
But I think the more she's getting involved with Richie, you really get to see how this is kind of like, at this moment in time, the best option for her, because she knows it bothers Irving. And whenever it's her and Richie sort of teaming up on something that Irving doesn't seem fully on board with, she has this kind of look in her eye, that's sort of like, this is my play. Like, now it's your turn. Like, how are you going to react to this? Like a challenging sort of thing. But Yeah, it is also, I mean, it's obviously at the end of the day about her and Irving, but just the way she plays within that in terms of, like you said, the sort of nesting doll of it, of sometimes it's not always easy to keep track of exactly who she's aligned with and who she wants to go with in the end. And both her and, Irving sort of slip in their personal relationships, like with him and Jeremy Renner, getting a little too comfortable there, and then really devastating him when he has to sort of betray him. Very similar situation with her and Bradley or Richie and his curls. But
oh my God, the curls. Yeah. They're too much. It's so much. I remember being so horrified then watching it of just like the little tiny rollers in his hair.
Yes.
That was, again, too much for me even in that period. But yeah, I think like they do have great chemistry. I would love to see them work together again. And I think it's a really interesting idea of how she withholds sex from him.
Yeah.
I like that idea for the character, but again, it doesn't go deeper than that at all. I want to know more from her of like her motivations around this. And because they do, I think, again, have great chemistry, and it is an additional layer of manipulation from her and control and power, but we still just don't understand that because the script it has way too much on its mind. Like you said, the details of the plot are so convoluted that we can't get into these more necessary explorations of the characters. I think that would have made it a better movie and would have honestly given her more to do in the role.
Exactly. Yeah. That whole scene where she is kind of wielding her sexual power is very striking. And, her saying no more fake shit. And she kind of like screams in ecstasy when she's alone on the toilet.
Yeah.
I mean, who among us hasn't, I suppose, but
I guess that's just 2013 was wild.
Yeah. One of those images that always sticks out when I think of this performance. It's her just like screaming while she's in the stall. For what it's worth. I don't know.
Yeah, it is a funny image. That did make me laugh because I hadn't seen this actually. I hadn't rewatched it ever. I just watched it in theaters that one time, so I had completely really forgotten quite a bit of it, except for the two memories I had were of the disco and of her in that fabulous leather dress. Like that's what I had remembered, and not liking Jennifer Lawrence's performance, but that's not what this discussion is going to be focused on. So it was interesting to return to it, and then that image again of her on the toilet was hilarious. I did laugh.
Well, actually, why don't we just take that little tangent first off, because the scene in the bathroom where her and Rosalind are kind of coming face to face with each other, and Sydney is kind of concerned that she's going to screw everything up, this very delicate operation, and Rosalind is just calling her husband's whore, and that like he'll never leave me and all this stuff, and then Sydney says that what she and Irving had was more real than anything they ever had. And I just find the writing here to be so atrocious. It suddenly becomes like Real Housewives in a way, and just like
I wrote that down.
Oh yeah, well there you go. So yeah, like an ending with like Rosalind kissing Sydney and laughing. It just is so cringeworthy, and I think neither of them can really save it, quite frankly. And that's why when I also watched Amy Adams' Golden Globe speech for this, and when she said something about how like, David, you write such great roles for women, I'm just like, well,
really?
Are we sure about that?
Are we sure?
Yeah. I don't know. That just always stuck out to me as like a really, really not good scene, especially for Jennifer Lawrence, sadly.
It's not great. And I just think Jennifer Lawrence is so miscast. I think like the age is completely wrong. It's just not a good role for her. And I think that his movies do demand over-the-top, loud performances. And that's really, I think, what she's accustomed to in working with him, too. Her Silver Linings Playbook performance is also very loud. And I think it makes sense why actors love his movies and give them so many nominations, especially at the time. But yeah, that scene, I think the writing is really, really tough. And neither of them can really overcome that. But what I did write down was, it makes me really excited for Jennifer Lawrence's Real Housewives movie, because she's going to be in a movie that is inspired by her obsession with The Real Housewives, because she watches all of them. She's one of my go-to people who I align with on my Bravo opinions. So I can't wait for that. I feel like that will give her, hopefully, the right writing and her, I think, power now as a producer to really create a great character.
Yeah. And also maybe be the right age to maybe play certain
that
characters.
That too. It's a big part of it.
Yeah. Well, one last thing on this that I wanted to note is one of Amy's most notable quotes in the film is the scene at the tarmac where she kind of lays down the law to Irving about just being sick of the uncertainty in their relationship and all this. Mm-hmm. And it culminates in her saying, "You're nothing to me until you're everything." And that's kind of the line I kind of associate with her here. And it does speak to her all or nothing kind of attitude. And I think in a film where not every line is delivered with the utmost confidence, she does land the vulnerability and the strength of that too, kind of simultaneously. So, you know, I do wish there was slightly more to the character at the end of the day than being so motivated by the men in her life. But that is ultimately a script issue. So hard to get too mad at her, you know.
I like that scene too. And that was rightfully her Oscar clip.
Yeah.
I do think it's like her best scene in the movie. And I did want to share my little fan casting with you of if I were casting this in the 70s, who I would put in it, because I couldn't get it out of my head. But let's just say we went back in time. Somehow we're making American Hustle back then. Warren Beatty is Irving.
Of course.
He has to be. I wonder how he would feel about gaining weight for the role. I don't know if he would do that, but I think that he could just look like Warren Beatty and it would be fine. Yeah. Faye Dunaway obviously is Sydney. We have to have the two of them together, and you correctly predicted that I would pick the two of them for this. I think my favorite picks though are for the other characters. I would have John Travolta as Richie.
Wow.
I was thinking of the disco.
Well, perfect for the disco scene, right? Yeah.
Yep. And you need someone who's Italian, and you could see him like in that little apartment with his mom and the fish tank. And then thinking with the age issue for Rosalind and someone who I think can do drama and comedy really well, I was thinking about Diane Cannon from Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, who gives one of my favorite supporting actress performances.
And Heaven Can Wait, which she was in
Heaven
with
Can Wait, Warren Beatty.
Yep.
So that's my fan cast.
That's perfect. Yeah. I wonder who you would get to direct.
Oh, gosh. I mean, we could just have a young Martin Scorsese.
Might as well.
We could just do that.
He's around.
Might as well.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. I don't know why I pictured also Warren Beatty directing this too, and how wild that would be.
I mean, that could work, right? Yeah. I think he would want to. That would make sense.
Yeah. Wow. Well, now I wish we got that version.
I know, right? So. But I do like Amy Adams in this. I just wish that the movie was better for her and supported her a bit more.
Yes. Also, any thoughts on the British accent with Lady Edith? Because that's also a sticking point for people.
I'm not a British person, so I'm not probably you should ask Baby Clyde.
That's true.
But I think that it works in that it doesn't, to me at least, sound like a great British accent. It sounds like it's put on, which she is doing. And so the idea of her character not being able to have a perfect posh British accent, which this character would with her London banking connections. I think whether that's an intentional choice or not, I don't know. But if it is intentional, I think it's solid.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on it personally.
Yeah.
In terms of what exactly is the intention here, and the whole scene where Richie flips out whenever she drops the accent. And it's just oh my god.
It's like, you're American. What? Where are you? All that. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. So anyway, just wanted to get your take on that. But unless you had anything else, I think we can move on. Yeah,
let's move on.
All right. Our next nominee is Sandra Bullock in Gravity. So Sandra Bullock gets her second Oscar nomination 4 years after her big win for The Blind Side, following that sort of career high. She was only in one other film before 2013, which was Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. She had a kind of supporting part in that, but it is also a Best Picture nominee. So continuing her sort of prestige era, you could say. And then 2013, it's actually a pretty similar situation as her 2009, where she had a big comedy hit in the summer with The Heat, which she starred in with Melissa McCarthy. Great film. And then she had her more dramatic turn in the fall to winter area with Gravity and gets this nomination. And this is another one of those roles that went through a big casting process. So Angelina Jolie was originally attached, but she had to pass. Same with Marion Cotillard and Blake Lively and Natalie Portman.
Sorry, Blake Lively. I forgot about that one.
Yep. And there were plenty of others. Like, I have a whole list here. Abby Cornish, Rebecca Hall, Scarlett Johansson, Sienna Miller, Carey Mulligan, Naomi Watts, and Olivia Wilde. So,
wow.
Yeah. Could have gotten many different versions of Gravity than the one we got with some of those.
Could have. Yeah.
But then Sandra was offered the role pretty directly by Warner Brothers, and so Gravity, directed by Alfonso Cuarón, huge undertaking, lots of practical effects, visual effects. Sandra was in a big mechanical rig for a lot of the film, lots of sort of robotics work, so it was a major technical undertaking on top of her having to obviously deliver a emotional performance. So Gravity is a sci-fi thriller set in outer space, and it begins with Bullock as Dr. Ryan Stone, an astronaut on her first space mission on the Space Shuttle Explorer, as she's making alterations to the Hubble. One of her coworkers is Matt Kowalski, George Clooney, a much more experienced astronaut, and the two of them try to survive after a bunch of space debris destroys much of their ship and the Hubble, and she eventually gets separated from Matt and has to figure out how to get back to Earth safely alone. So this is a very unique nomination here, I would say. Tell me your thoughts on Sandra Bullock as an actress, as a movie star, and her very physical performance here.
Yeah, so this is such a unique nomination. So I'm excited to talk about it. But Sandra Bullock, she's America's sweetheart. I feel like also I've only ever heard the nicest things about her. Yeah. So she's totally earned, I think, that label really is that type of movie star, because she just seems like a really cool, nice person. And I also have a soft spot for her, obviously, because I grew up with her. And especially I think her romantic comedies, and you think of like Miss Congeniality, which I loved. I would watch Practical Magic all the time while you were sleeping. The Proposal, which is a bit later on from those. But then I also really love her in Speed. So I think she actually is a movie star who has a lot of natural charm and charisma and can really do any genre, which is, I think, a really cool thing that does benefit her here. I think especially with her experience as an action thriller star. I think that connects really well with her performance in Gravity, which I actually really loved on this watch. I feel like she's pretty incredible in this movie, and it's such an upgrade from The Blind Side. It's like one of, I think, Oscar history's greatest upgrades in terms of nomination to nomination. And I
Especially
think I was
win
really
to nomination too.
Literally,
you know?
Right? Oh my God. And I think I also really liked it because she reminded me a lot of Sigourney Weaver in this. Like I was thinking about her in Alien and Aliens and how those kind of felt, to me at least, like sister performances. And as far as Gravity, it's funny because I've been so cold on this movie actually over the years, and I am still a little bit, but I think she's so successful at bringing this like emotional heft and resolve to the performance, and you are rooting for her to figure everything out and find her way back the whole time. And she's completely alone. Not only the character being alone, but Sandra Bullock performing by herself. She doesn't have anyone else to bounce anything off of or play off of. Like it is really just her, which makes it, I think, such a cool, unique performance and nomination.
Yeah, this is a really cool nomination, and so much better than her nomination win for The Blind Side, which I discussed with our friend Nick.
Yes.
That was a wild time.
Such a fun episode.
Yes. I have the Oscar Wilde co-hosts covering Sandy Bullock. I don't know how this happened. Total coincidence. But yeah, to me, just the performance in Gravity is impressive on its own without even knowing the context of all the technical demands involved. The fact that she pulls off the level of emotional performance she gives, and that Cuarón also is kind of providing that grounding too, even with all the mechanical sort of things that he has to worry about there. It's just really good stuff. And you have to consider that like her character is so limited, and like so much of the film is about her thinking and going from one thing to the next, and there's not a lot to be done as far as, you know, the traditional sort of characterization. So she just has to provide so much non-verbally and with her face and with the tension of her body, and it's all just very primal and very elemental as a performance. But for me, there is still that kind of Sandy Bullock charm that manages to sort of peek through at all the right times that makes you want to invest in her journey. And I think it's a much more subtle version of that, but you need a kind of movie star, I think, of her caliber to just make the audience invest right away and think of her as competent, even though she's only on her first space mission here. And I think she definitely provides the right mix of that strength and vulnerability to get us there emotionally and feel a kind of kinship with her, even if we can't personally relate to what she's going through by any means, or even her background or her personal work philosophy. Even you understand and you empathize, for me, right off the bat.
Yeah, I agree. And what makes me think about, you know, how great this performance really is too, is that in the beginning, I actually think, you know, on rewatch, knowing what's coming, I just wanted to get to the parts where she was alone, because I think those parts of the movie are so successful. I think early the dialogue is a little corny and silly, where it's just like, Houston, I have a bad feeling about this mission. And, you know, the setup is told like it's an incredibly broad strokes, right? Like she feels, I think, like a pretty thinly drawn Ripley, where it's like, oh, she's a fish out of water, but she's also the smart and responsible one of like, you're the genius here. And a lot of that is coming from Clooney's character, Matt, and I think his performance, which is just straight up George Clooney. And what she does, I think that's so good, is that so much of her early work in the movie is just breath work. Like, you're just hearing her breathe, and somehow it's so convincing. It's not over the top to me in any way. It's just like feeling her fear, really. And I think she's able to make that believable and ground you in that. And she doesn't, I think sometimes we talk about this with hair and makeup nominees getting lost under the prosthetics. But for me, she doesn't get weighed down by her spacesuit at all. Like, that's a lot to, you know, be wearing and to kind of hide the fact that you're a beautiful, charismatic movie star. But you still, I think, see her as a human. She's not weighed down by any of that at all.
Right. And then the nightmare happens when the ship is hit and the debris is going everywhere and she goes hurtling off into space, and it's really terrifying, and it's like tapping into a very real fear, just the lack of control. And I think Cuarón gives us this great close-up of her face in the suit, and it's just like her face is just like stretched out across almost the whole screen, and it's almost uncomfortably close, and we see her kind of panting and her eyes almost bulging out, and it's very effective for sort of getting us in her mindset, and she delivers on the communicating the helplessness there. You know, she can only, again, really rely on her face because she's in this bulky suit, and there's some dialogue, but after a while, it's almost like a silent film performance in a way. And so for as sort of vast as outer space is, for her in moments like that, especially in the beginning, it feels almost claustrophobic to watch her, and you feel that from her.
Yeah, I love that. And she's not really able to rely on some of the things that we're used to in other Sandy performances, right? Like, it's much more difficult for her, I think, to, like, on paper, be able to communicate her emotions and, you know, what she's going through with us, but yet she does it pretty flawlessly. And I like, too, that she is good at her job, but she also lets us in on that fear that she's feeling. Like, it feels very realistic of what someone would be going through up there. And then when that fear kicks in, she feels like the hero of the movie, but also somehow, I think because of our relationship with her, we're naturally rooting for her. And in certain scenes, she feels almost like the audience surrogate of like, what would we do if we were in this situation? How would we feel if we were alone up there? Or, you know, would we start... This is one of many performances here where characters in this year talk to themselves, which is kind of funny. But
yeah.
I like... Really, I think too, when she is telling those stories about her past, again, like the dialogue doesn't always work for me or feels a little bit silly, but I believe in her as a character who's also dealing with grief. And you think about, okay, why is she up in space? Why is she so far away from home? Or why is she hesitant to talk about home at first and where that is for her to Matt? And I think that all of those scenes are played really beautifully.
Yeah, the whole thing of her mentioning her daughter having died when she was 4 in an accident and how now she just drives as a way to sort of clear her head. It's such a quiet scene, but she really kind of makes you lean in almost and listen. And it does obviously help provide a little bit of insight into this woman who poured herself into work after this personal tragedy. And this is just her life now. She can't make room for anyone else or anything else. So, yeah, maybe it's slightly clunky in terms of writing, and there's a reason why it didn't get a screenplay nomination. But,
right.
you know, what she communicates is extremely empathetic and almost naturalistic, even within all of this, you know, mechanical stuff she's having to work with. Yeah,
I agree. It does. I liked your comparison of it feeling like a silent film performance, because so much of it does feel like that. It's what's interesting about it, right, is it is this full movie star performance, yet it also really could exist in any era, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, for sure. The most traditional scene, I would say, in terms of an acting showcase is when she is having this communication over the radio with this Inuit person, which is heartbreaking because it sort of seems like this is going to be a lifeline at first, but that they can't help her, and she kind of just resolves to be sort of comforted by the sound of this howling dog and also a baby that's sort of making noise too, and it helps to get her back in touch with some semblance of reality in a way, but also it's like she's out of fuel and she only has like under 90 minutes to make all this happen, so she's kind of gradually accepting her death in a way. And so I think that is her most, again, like traditionally impactful acting moment in the film, where she says she's going to die, and she says, it's funny that to know. And she admits that she's really scared and how she doesn't really have anyone to like pray for her or pray for her soul or anything. And just that breakdown as she starts crying, I think is actually really beautifully performed, because it could have been so hammy, but she makes it feel really natural and just very cathartic in terms of just like accepting what might happen to her, what will likely happen to her, but also still having that layer of fear too.
Yeah, I was actually, when I was watching this scene as she's crying, I was thinking about Matthew McConaughey in Interstellar and how I know that scene doesn't work for people just because it's so much, and he's really, really going for it, and I understand, you know, why people would fall on either side of that. I do happen to really like that movie a lot, but this, I think this is her best scene, and where you do feel, I think, the most connected to her and her vulnerability. And it's a shift for her character too, right? Starting out being cool, calm, collected. You can't really envision this person expressing their emotions really. And then we get to this point where it is just pure survival and fear and worry. And when she does think she's going to die and she starts howling, I remember thinking that was so cheesy when I watched it the first time. And this time I was crying. I did tear up. I was like very moved by her. So growth we have evolved a bit, right? And I think that's also just like, I don't know, like getting older and just, I don't know, thinking about those things more frequently in your life and the meaning of it. And I think with her character, I was really, I think, feeling it so much by the end, and her vulnerability up there.
I love that. Yeah, I kind of felt a little bit the same way in terms of the howling bit. I feel like that was even commented on and kind of laughed about even at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, watching it now, I'm like, yeah, I get it, girl. Howl away.
I don't even want to know what I would be doing if I were in that situation. It would be much worse. I would
have floated away by now, honestly.
Yeah.
But I would have been right with George Clooney.
Yeah. What a way to go.
Sooner.
With George Clooney.
Yeah. 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 But, and also that scene where she's like hallucinating him, visiting her and giving her advice after that. And she's kind of like coming to again and like resolving to go on and just trying to like propel herself to the station. And she has this little speech, I think, to herself / kind of to Matt as well in the afterlife in a way of, you know, kind of asking that he take care of her daughter now that he's passed on, and you know, telling her that her missing shoe was under the bed the whole time. And like, some of it may be a little corny, but like you need someone with that kind of movie star charisma to deliver a speech like that. And I think it just works. And the way she delivers that, I think, is also much more determined and active than before. So it's like she's kind of truly accepting her own strength and her own abilities to move forward. And then just that sort of confident sort of relief on her face as we get towards the end, I think, is actually quite beautiful. So
yeah, I agree. You really see her evolve as a character, which I love, and must be so hard to communicate when you're shooting a film too, to be thinking about like where you are on that survival journey. And yeah, I mean, I was tearing up when she was talking about that shoe, and that's my cynicism went out the window. It really did. My cold heart thawed, and I was moved by Sandy's abilities there. And I think with the Matt character too, it is a really unique swerve to kill him 30 minutes in. It's very like Janet Leigh in Psycho. I like that they did that, and I'm happy that they didn't actually bring him back, because I remember the first time I was watching it thinking, oh God, really? We're doing this? But it works. It's really effective, I think, as her hallucination, and with this speech that she gives, that it's to him, but also to herself, right?
Right.
I think that's really beautiful.
I remember also rewatching this after I watched it the first time with my parents. And when George Clooney did come back, and then it was revealed that it's a hallucination the whole time, she was just like, now why did they do that? She was just fully mad.
It had to upset all of the moms.
Yeah. But anyway, as we get to that conclusion and she's just like hurtling down into the atmosphere, I just love that mix of just like the euphoria of it, that like she kind of did it, but also she's not fully landed yet, so it's like a little bit of hesitance there. Great mix of emotion there. But then when she finally crash lands on the beach and she's like feeling the wet sand in her hands and feeling the breeze, and she's just laying there kind of exhausted but also relieved as all hell. It's just such a beautiful moment. I also think the score helps there too, but just like that big smile she gives, that Sandy Bullock smile as she is readjusting to life on dry land. It's great stuff. It's like movie magic stuff, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a really beautiful shot earlier in the film where she is out of her spacesuit and she's just floating, and it looks like she's in the womb. Yeah, it's really beautiful. Position. And then later when she lands and she's on Earth, I think it's so beautiful, and how she's connected with water and with nature again as this juxtaposition with space that just works. Like, it's like she's taking her first steps when she's getting up. It's like this, it's this new life for her. And yeah, that smile, it really is, I think, just, it's what you want, and you can only really get from a true movie star like her.
Yeah, that's the thing. There are actresses who could have done this and been good, but they wouldn't have had that awards sort of discussion, I think. But there's like
Right.
something about her sort of, in a way, tamping down her easy breezy movie star kind of Sandy Bullock thing appeal to fit this character and still have us feel a connection to a mostly thinly written character, if we're being honest, that I think was just like the perfect combination that she had to, it had to be her, you know?
I completely agree. We have a question about it later on, but like I can't see anyone else really in the role. I think it would have been fine maybe, but she's the one. And I have to say, as Reba would say, she's a survivor.
Wow. Well, we'll get to the survivor question later.
Yes, we will. I'm very ready for that.
Would she win on Survivor? We shall see. I don't know. Very different skill set. But anyway, shall we move on to our next nominee?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. Judi Dench in Philomena. So the last time we checked in with Dame Judi Dench, she was nominated for Notes on a Scandal in 2006. Arguably her best nomination to date, a real career peak, at least in my eyes. And in between that and Philomena, she is working pretty extensively, including reprising her role as M in Quantum of Solace and Skyfall, and getting quite a bit of awards buzz, actually, for the latter. She was in 9 in 2009, part of that great ensemble cast that wasn't always used properly, but still a great cast. She appeared in Jane Eyre. She was in the 4th Pirates of the Caribbean movie even. She was in My Week with Marilyn, J. Edgar, The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, which was kind of a surprise box office hit, enough to make a sequel. So absolutely booked and busy. A lot of great hits in there. So here comes Philomena in 2013, which gets her even more great reviews and lands her 7th Oscar nomination, joining a pretty great club of ladies there with 7 nominations. And of course, she still has another one to come about 8 years later in supporting actress for Sophia's favorite movie, Belfast.
Oh my God.
So
the color in her glasses.
Yeah, never forget.
Never forget
that
Belfast.
Enormous close-up at the end for her. That's what did it. But anyway, sorry to bring up old wounds, but had to do it.
It's fine.
Yeah.
We love Judi anyway.
Of course. Yes, Judi innocent. But with Philomena, this is based on the true story of an Irish woman named Philomena Lee, who was separated from her son for 50 years after the convent she was working at separated them because the baby was born out of wedlock. So 50 years later here, she's teaming up with this British journalist, Martin Sixsmith, who helped her find answers to what happened to her son. And the film tells her story with Judi Dench playing Philomena and Steve Coogan playing Martin. And as we see, the story takes many twists and turns along the way as she finally gets the answers that she has been missing all these years. So let's talk Dame Judi Dench, thoughts on our great dame here overall and her storied career and her performance in this film, which I believe I also described to you as ideal Sunday matinee cinema.
Well, I love, Dame Judi Dench, icon, legend, queen of Sunday matinee cinema. I love my British dramas, so she's a staple for me. I've watched so many of her films. I feel like she's probably, if I looked at my all-time Letterboxd stats, it would be like she has to be up there for me. I think I first saw her as M though, or at least that's where I kind of first started thinking more about her, and when she was just kind of like when I was growing up. But so many of her earlier works are really important to me and later ones as well, but especially Notes on a Scandal. I saw this movie at the Dollar Theater when I was a freshman in high school with my dad, and I was obsessed with it. I put the score on my iPod at the time. Again, I'm so glad I found people who would understand that choice and would maybe find it endearing and not totally bizarre. But that was just a really pivotal film for me, and we'll talk about that with Cate Blanchett too, but especially Judi Dench in that. I just thought that was so perfect, and it made me wish we had more Shakespearean villains written for women. I know you can gender bend those roles quite a bit, but she, I think, would just be fabulous in everything. And she's done a lot of Shakespeare, and I want to recommend this beautiful clip of her that I watch all the time, kind of, when she was on Graham Norton.
I know what you're talking about.
perfectly recites that sonnet from memory. And it is just, it moves me so much. It just like, you think about, Shakespeare has existed for centuries, and so many different actors have performed his works, but when you hear someone like Judi Dench just launch into a sonnet perfectly, there's just some sort of special power about that, about the words, but also about her as a performer. And I feel like there just aren't many actresses like her, and I think we can kind of lump the dames together sometimes, but I think she really is a British actress that stands out to me over the years and I really, really like her in Philomena. I hadn't seen this since it came out, and I had forgotten, honestly, a lot about it. And it was maybe the one I remembered least when I was getting to do these rewatches, but I was completely taken with the warmth of her performance in it. And I was just really hooked and invested in her journey the whole time. So I really liked her in this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my history with the film is I remember seeing it in the theater. None of my friends wanted to see it with me, perhaps for obvious reasons, but
I would have gone with you.
Okay.
With my notes on Scandal on my iPod.
Yes, exactly. Yes, getting hyped before in the car, just like playing the score. Anyway, so I was with a crowd of, I'll say, mostly the AARP audience. And I remember it playing like absolute gangbusters. Like, such a vocal audience responding to what was happening on the screen and reacting in the best ways, honestly, to like all the twists and all the new developments in the story. Like, it was pretty ideal. But over time, I think I kind of like chalked it up to, middlebrow, Weinstein, Oscar bait. That was good, but not really anything to like write home about, even Judi's performance. And so when I watched it again, I was very pleasantly surprised with how invested I was and how moved I was by Judi's performance, because yes, it does have that right down the middle appeal to it, but I do think it earns your emotional investment through the writing. I think this is actually our first film that is well written that we're talking about. That both Dench and Coogan are supported by the writing and how it sort of contextualizes her story in a respectful way and also doesn't make her into just like this doddering old lady type. Like, it's really very affecting, and her characterization, I think, is so specific that you really do feel like Philomena like right away. And as the film goes on, we're seeing more layers and seeing her earnestness and how her trauma kind of informs the way that she behaves and the way she talks to Martin and tries to get him to be more respectful. It's just very specific. And like, she could have been so lazy with this. She could have done a role like this in her sleep. But she really puts in the time, I think, to make her three-dimensional. I'm sure it weighed on her that, she's playing a real person here, so she has to take good care of her to some degree and represent her well. But yeah, it's just a really sweet and earnest movie that also tackles some dark subject matter, with a light touch in a way, but also in a very dynamic way that she just makes you believe her and just desperately want her to find answers because of how cruelly that she was treated, in the past by these horrible nuns.
Yeah. Awful nuns. And I think she's so good in the movies, like very quiet, contemplative moments. Like when she just says, he'll be 50 today. Like the way she says that just hits me, right? It's just how she's feeling about the relationship with her son that she's lost and she's never known because of the cruelty of these nuns. And what I think is so interesting about the character, the writing and the performance is that she still won't be mean about or critical of the nuns. Like, she's a very forgiving and understanding person in a way that I'm much more like the Martin character. Like, I would never be able to be.
Right, exactly.
And I think that part of her personality, the lack of bitterness and anger, is that's a really interesting layer to the character, and I think one that she totally nails. And it's frustrating, I think, at times to at least it would be more so, I think, in the hands of another actress to see, her just let these people walk all over her and, think of what they've taken from her. But with Judi's performance here, I feel like I understand why she's like that and why she behaves that way based on her upbringing and her faith and just how she views the world. She's a very warm and positive person. And it's like very lightly inspiring that someone in the face of all of that hardship and who's had such a difficult life can still be that way.
Yeah. I like that the film and in her performance, it's like she's taking a little bit of ownership over what happened to her as much as she can. And she doesn't want to be seen as helpless or as a victim who got kind of manipulated or tricked into any of this. And it's obviously not that she blames herself, but at the same time, at least in the beginning, there is that feeling of like, well, the church is the church, and I'm not one to question them too harshly because she is still a very religious person. And I think there is a bit of pride there in not wanting to feel helpless or embarrassed, even though there's very little that was in her control in this situation. But also it's like she doesn't want to like judge or criticize too harshly at the same time because she is that optimistic person.
Yeah. And she's just so cute. Like when she's on the plane telling him about her book or when they're at breakfast going over the orders and all of the different omelet options, or my personal favorite when she asks him if he wants to stay in and watch Big Mama's House because it's on TV. Oh my God. Her line readings there are so funny.
Yeah, or just like yapping with the chef at the hotel. It's just yeah. And I love when she gets her jabs in at Martin for being such a curmudgeon and like being so rude to people. Like when she just tells him to be nice to people on the way up because you may need them on the way down. It's it could be very corny and just like a silly little old lady witticism kind of thing, but she just makes it feel like this is just her personal philosophy. She is just a good-hearted person.
Yeah. And it's such an obvious, I think, like BBC convention that, of course, like a character like Martin and what he's been through in the press and everything would be more negative and critical, and that they're, complete opposites of each other. But I think it really does work in the way that it's written and performed. And it's those tropes are there, but I wasn't bothered with them, I think, in the way that I am sometimes.
I think, they play off each other really beautifully. And then the whole reveal that we get that her son actually became a Republican senior advisor and worked under the Reagan administration and George H.W. Bush, and that he died in 1995. Just the way that she silently processes it and then just collapses into a puddle, I think is so beautifully done. It's obviously a big moment, but it's devastating because I think there was a part of her that really feared something like this may have happened and may have actually been prepared for it, that she would be disappointed. And that's what makes it more devastating than if he was actually found or if she just never thought about it. The fact that she kind of sensed that this may be the case,
Yeah, it's like her worst fear coming true. I did think too, this is a little silly, but I was like, well, if he would have, if the nuns would have let him stay with her, he never would have worked for Reagan. He never would have been a Republican because she would have stopped that from happening. But alas, all jokes aside, I think that is that moment, right? It is, I think it's painful and she plays it perfectly. And then going into the moments where then Martin realizes that he has met him before, and it kickstarts another part of their journey where she, I think, can sort of feel and understand him a bit more, her son, who she's never met. And I think it's just it's so beautiful and so painful when she asks everyone that she meets, did he ever mention Ireland? Like, did he ever ask where he came from or talk about this, like, as part of his background? Like that, I think she also communicates really, really beautifully.
Yeah, just that eagerness to learn anything she can about him. Yeah. And that she doesn't just give up and go home,
Right.
I get it. I get where that comes from. And it's like she's so ready to just like drink in every last detail of his life that she can from the people who knew him. So, you know, she learns he was obviously an important person and that he was gay and he died of AIDS and had a partner, and that like she instinctively knew he was gay even from an early age as like a toddler. And I just kind of love how honest and open-minded she is and how casually she tosses certain lines off about wondering if he was bi-curious or like when she discovers that Martin actually met him, you know, at this event, and she like hounds him about every last detail, and he's kind of not giving her too much, but she's just like taking everything of like, oh, he's said hello and he seemed smart and he seemed nice, and she just kind of like eats it all up so eagerly.
He had a firm handshake. All of those little like small details that feel, I think, so insignificant when you know a person or you're interacting with a person regularly, but for her it's like that's all she has to cling to, and it's so cute. I think when she does keep repeating those little details. And I love the candor of the character too. Like you were mentioning, those little details in the lines, and even earlier when she's talking about like how much she loved sex. Like that was just like, it's good that she's speaking like that. I love that detail of her character.
Yeah, absolutely. She is not afraid. And the line I always like is when she says, perhaps he played the harp. He was gay.
Yeah.
Just like,
when it's like, it's supposed to be this like very serious moment of like, well, what's that then? Look at this pin that he's wearing. It's a Celtic harp. Right. And then that's her response. It's so great.
I know. But, you know, the whole thing of him seeing the Irish harp lapel there and leading to the partner who tells that her son actually did go to Ireland and spoke to the nuns. And then they told him that Philomena abandoned him. It's just so appalling that they would do this, and the total shock that washes over her. It's just this mix of relief and sadness and outrage in a way too. This poor woman, like you just want to reach out and hug her, you know.
I know. Oh, it's so painful, and those nuns are so evil, and I think really gets into, you know, even though it's like, it's very heightened, but this is how, you know, it's based on a true story, and it's how I think people in positions of power within the Catholic Church just like imposing their own judgments on that, and that core question of, you know, how is what you're doing exhibiting Christian values? It's not, right? That is a conflict. And I did in that moment really want Philomena to just fight. Like I wanted her to just go after this nun, but of course, like that is not what the character does. And in a way, it's even more brutal for her to say, like, I forgive you, because I'm sure that was even more painful to that horrible nun.
That.
Yeah.
But for her specifically, it's hard for her, as she says, like, that's hard for me. You know, she says that. Yeah. But it's really, really uncomfortable. But her son is dead and he can't be brought back. And so to some extent, it really does feel like she can't hold on to that anger any longer, because it's not her, and it's just not going to suit anyone to hold on to that after decades and decades. So it's just a really beautiful, bittersweet movie and a beautiful performance at its center that I just, again, appreciate that she really took it so seriously, and it doesn't just feel like an easy throwaway, like, oh, Judi Dench playing another Sunday matinee type of character, give her a nomination. Like, for me, she fully earns this and deserved the praise that she got for it. And I wish she factored in more to the awards discussion, because she was kind of just like a nominee through most of the season. Yeah.
And I think on paper, I think people still do look at this performance that way, either if they haven't watched it or if they, you know, it's been a while since they've seen it, they do think of it as like, oh, you know, there's Judi Dench getting another nomination for another British movie. Like how, you know, of course. But when you actually watch it, like if I did rankings of these nominations, she'd be high up there. She's definitely top 3. And I think that it's really delicate, subtle work, so warm, shows her power as an actress. And my last thing I have to say, fun fact, is that when they're in DC, there's a shot of her. It's when they're going to meet just to learn more about her son. And they're going to talk to this woman who knew him. And the exterior of the office is the Folger Shakespeare Library in DC, where I used to be a docent and give tours. And I just know that those people there probably welcomed Judi Dench with open arms and gave her the royal treatment. And I'm sure she got to see all of the folios and quartos and everything that they have there.
Oh, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh, yeah. I mean, honestly, I could have just watched the two of them just like taking a full tour of America.
Right. Like a road trip movie. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, shall we move on to our last losing nominee?
Here we go.
Gearing up for this one. All right.
Yep.
Meryl Streep in August, Osage County. Meryl Streep getting her 18th Oscar nomination here for August, Osage County, just continuing to extend her lead as the most nominated actor in Academy history. And this is her first nomination since her win for The Iron Lady. So maybe you could say it's a bit of an afterglow Halo nomination from that. I don't know. But interesting that the love didn't really stop after her third win. It just kept on going. But in between The Iron Lady and August Osage County, she does a bunch of narrating for documentaries. And she does another romantic comedy for the older crowd with Hope Springs, where she plays the sassy sheriff Hope Springs. Real ones will understand that reference. But
yep.
yes. But this is August Osage County, an adaptation of a Pulitzer Prize-winning play of the same name, written by the great Tracy Letts. Speaking of Carrie Coon, this is a big, somewhat farcical ensemble comedy drama with Meryl Streep playing the domineering matriarch of an Oklahoma family. Real quick here, others considered for the role apparently were Annette Bening, Glenn Close, Jane Fonda, Jessica Lange, and Sissy Spacek. All would have been interesting in this role, but they went with Meryl, and, you know, hard to blame them for doing so, considering all that she represents and box office wise and everything. So the film is following the dysfunctional Weston family who come together after the disappearance and ultimately death of the family patriarch, Beverly. So we're introduced to Violet, Meryl Streep, who has oral cancer and is dangerously addicted to pills and often takes out her pain on her family. She has 3 daughters, Barbara, Julia Roberts, Ivy, Julianne Nicholson, and Karen, Juliette Lewis, each with their own distinct quirks. We have Margot Martindale and Chris Cooper as Violet's sister and brother-in-law. We have Benedict Cumberbatch as their son, Abigail Breslin as the daughter of Barbara and Bill, Ewan McGregor, Dermot Mulroney as Karen's new fiance, and Misty Upham as the new caregiver to Violet. So it's a big ensemble cast, lots of big names, lots of drama, and we watch them go at it over the course of a hot August week. So anyway, let's talk Meryl Streep. Thoughts on Meryl overall. I could be wrong, actually, but I was looking back and like in all of our episodes we've done, I don't think we've ever even properly talked about Meryl, just like together. So yeah.
I was thinking that too. Yeah. It's with Meryl, we've definitely talked about her offline, I think, but never like on an episode of how we feel. And Meryl Streep, my birthday twin, the greatest actress of her generation, I think, full stop, no contest. She has 2 of my favorite category wins ever. I think her performance in Kramer versus Kramer is absolutely stunning. And again, one of my favorite favorite wins there.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And then lead for Sophie's Choice. Like
so not the Iron Lady. Okay.
Just not the Iron Lady, I'm sorry, but that is an interesting year. I loved your conversation on that.
Thank you.
But I would say Kramer versus Kramer and Sophie's Choice really do stand above the rest of her nominations, performances. She also has so many, I think, great performances that are nominated but didn't win. I love her in Bridges of Madison County, or ones that she didn't even get nominated for, like The Hours. She is, I think, just one of those incredible actresses where you understand, I think, why she is so celebrated, why people love her so much. And in this period, we were definitely in the Meryl gets nominated if she breathes phase of her career, which is really interesting. But there's always something fun about a Meryl performance. I do always like watching them, even if it's this one. And she definitely is worse, I think, for me at least, than the one we'll talk about today. But this one it's a rough one for me. I think some of it is casting. I don't think she's totally right for the role, but also I think that a lot of it is the direction of this. It's a fairly miserable movie, and you just have to sit there and hear everyone yelling at each other throughout the whole thing. And she starts the movie with this huge scene, and you just instantly know, okay, this is what this is going to be. It's very hammy. It's very theatrical. She's stumbling around like she's in a Tennessee Williams play. And of course, she got nominated for it. Like, it does make sense that, of course, people in the industry and her peers saw this and thought, this is great acting because it's Meryl Streep, but also that theatrical nature of the role. She's doing a lot in this movie.
Yes, capital A acting for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's hard not to love Meryl. She rarely gives a bad performance. This, for me, is actually one of her weaker nominations. And before people come at me, I understand that this is supposed to be like a black comedy, big theatrical performance, farcical, larger than life. I fully get all of that. I personally just think she's miscast, like you said.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of good performances in this, and a lot of them fit their roles really well. And even though they're famous faces and everything, I still believe them as these people, especially Julia Roberts, who I think is fantastic and is the perfect person to go toe to toe with Meryl in those more heightened moments. For me, it's just that I see Meryl acting here. I see the tics. I hear the accent. I think her deepening her voice just sounds unnatural to me. And it feels like she's trying to match Margot Martindale there. It just sounds false to me. I'm sorry. I think she does land some of the more emotional beats here because she's been doing this for decades and decades by this point, and she knows what she's doing, at least on a character level. So I just feel like when I look at the list of alternatives, and when I see like people like Sissy Spacek or Jessica Lange or honestly even Glenn Close, I just think they could have done a slightly better job of inhabiting the role and make it just feel more natural and also feel more rural in a way. I don't know if she fully comes across as a Southern woman, at least in this context.
Yeah, I mean, I think she comes across at times just like Meryl Streep in a wig. Like it feels like it's just, she's never, at least for me, like inhabiting that character, like you said, and those other names. It's like there are a few times where I think, oh yeah, someone would have been better than Meryl Streep in that role or a better casting choice. But this really is one of them. And I think a big part of that really is through some of the other casting choices and the other relationships in the movie. I do think she's believable as the mother to Julia Roberts because I like their toe-to-toe fights, but it doesn't compare to like the casting of the sisters, which I think is perfect. I feel like I believe all three of them as being sisters and how they would go their separate ways. But the fact that Margot Martindale is supposed to be Meryl's sister, I can only suspend my disbelief so far. And this was one of the things I did have trouble with in watching this again.
Yeah. For me, it just reads as kind of like the patrician New England adjacent actress pretending to be from Oklahoma rather than feeling like naturally born and bred there. Like, I really cannot stop picturing what Sissy Spacek could have done in this role, and I think it would have been incredible. She's already played these kind of like hardened mothers, like in The Bedroom, and honestly even North Country, which was a much smaller role, but like she could really tap into something really great here. And she perfectly obviously reads as someone who could be from Oklahoma, so just saying. But
I know.
So when I look past some of that and like the affected sort of deep voice and the fact that she doesn't read as Southern, I do think her comedic timing and her delivery is actually really, really great, especially the bluntness with how she talks to her daughters, and honestly pretty much everyone in her family, but especially her daughters. Like, it's actually a comparatively small moment, like when she kind of like rolls her eyes about Karen coming around to help because she's so messy and unreliable and kind of like a black sheep, or telling Iva, "You look like a lesbian." She should put more effort into her appearance, or showing this very clear favoritism to Barbara, her oldest, and like rushing down to hug her the minute she gets there. You definitely get this sort of specifics of how she raised these girls and how she is always going to be a truth teller, as she likes to say. And by that, we mean just like brutal and just saying the worst of the worst things that come into her mind, and never self-censoring ever.
Yeah. I think there are some really good traces of the Meryl we know and love here. I think you can catch them in glimpses. Like, sometimes I think it's best when it's either those comedic moments like you were talking about, which I love some of her line deliveries here, but also it's in sometimes a look in her eyes when she's trying to guilt trip her daughters. Like, there is a nastiness to the judgment and guilt that she puts on other people. And it is, I think, when you hear the accent and you hear how over the top it is, it can be easy to just say like, okay, it's not, it's not working. This feels like it's too much. And you can overlook the emotion to the performance. But like, there's a moment where she has a look in her eyes so after Bev has disappeared, like when they're looking for him, and you can tell like she's saying she's worried about him and where he's gone, but there's also a lot going on in her eyes. It's hard to, I think, focus on what she's actually feeling. And she is someone who I think on paper and through portions of the movie, she's like I'll say whatever's on my mind type of character. But in reality, she does withhold quite a bit. And that's where I think we really start to see that. And those moments, I think, work really well. But they're few and far between. And I think other times also they just get lost under the weight of the hair and makeup and the loud nature of her performance.
Yeah, I think an early example of that is when Barbara's really starting to go in on her, and Violet kind of starts to play the victim a little bit and just like cries about Barbara yelling at her about taking too many pills, and she's trying to gain that sort of easy sympathy, which is, definitely like, not to paint with too broad a brush, but that's something that I have seen these kinds of domineering types do when they're called out or feeling scared, is to put the blame on other people and shame them for calling them out. And that's especially true among family, I think. But that is the interesting thing you see in her performance that is obviously telegraphed early on, is how she responds when it comes to their discussions of him going missing and whether he'll come back. And you see something flash in her eyes that suggests that she knows more than she's letting on, So
and I think she's so good at like the guilt again of like when she says to Barbara, like she's guilting her into coming home for this or trying to make her feel bad about that, and she says, "You didn't come home when I had cancer." And it's that like thing that I think some parents do, not my own if you're listening, but when their kids move away from home,
for sure.
That is, I think, a very common thing that parents do to their kids and what they put them through. And there's another moment later on where she's trying to get rid of stuff, like after the funeral and that sideboard in particular. And she makes a comment like, "Oh, well, you can't take this because you live far away now, or do you have room for it?" Like, she's asking if anyone wants it, even though she knows the answer. It's just like so mean and manipulative.
Yeah, I know. It gets under your skin, I think, after a while. And so, I mean, like, obviously the big dinner scene we do have to talk about with everyone around the table when she's once again hopped up on pills, and she goes to dinner and she's, let's be honest, she's basically looking for a fight, right? And just like looking for someone to take out
yeah.
her pain on. And she's like sassing the men for not wearing their suits to dinner. And just also the faces she makes as Chris Cooper is saying grace and is just rambling on and on and on are so funny. And she's just like staring at him with this look of like, you have got to be kidding me. This, like, I swear to God, wrap it up.
It's
like,
very, by all means, move at a glacial pace. You know how that thrills me.
It really is that energy communicated in a wig like that. Yeah. It's just, yeah, hamming it up, but it's just delicious. And she's playing off the other actors so well and just acting like an asshole who just loves ripping people. And there's almost like a smugness there of being like, I know what's what. Like, I'm going to cut through all of the pretentious sort of bullshit that people are talking about, like with Abigail Breslin saying she doesn't eat meat because you're ingesting the animal's fear, or like making fun of, you know, Karen's fiance's German name, for example. Right. And I also love how she does sort of modulate within that, of how it does just become like, it's very funny and, you know, making these little observations at first, but it just becomes increasingly vicious and spiteful and not fun. And it just sucks all of the energy out of the room, especially when the Abigail Breslin character is like calling her mother, Barbara, a liar. And just Violet looks her like dead in the eye and says, you know, if I ever called my mother a liar, she would have knocked my goddamn head off my shoulders. And just like silence.
Yeah. There's so much yelling, which I think is, I think probably better communicated on stage, honestly, and would feel a bit more real in how people do, you know, behave after a funeral or when you're around family, when you're in grief and those walls are down. It's like you don't really have to perform for anyone. And I think with Meryl in particular, you do. I like, what you said about how she modulates and how you do see that whatever is there of a wall start to fade away and she just gets more and more vicious. I do love her line reading of, when you eat an animal, you ingest its fur. I think that's so funny. It just
it's
like
fur.
It's fur. It's so funny.
And then she just like cracks herself up in that moment too.
She does. So and good. The whole like, when she says, where's the meat? And she's like, where's the meat? Knowing that it's where's the beef? Like those, I think she is really good at those moments. And she is like a matriarch holding court. And it's like, even if you don't like the movie or like we might be a little lower on the performance, it is, I think, still fun to watch Meryl there in that role. I think in some of the choices that she makes, even though it's hard to watch at times.
Agreed. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I feel like as it goes on, she does start to recede a bit from the narrative. As we kind of go into all these other plot lines of like the cousins who are secret lovers and with Julianne Nicholson and Benedict Cumberbatch and Margot Martindale having this secret affair years ago with Violet's husband, and this one thing with like Dermot Mulroney and Abigail Breslin.
Yep. It's so weird. It's just, it's like they do want to introduce so many, like there's so much going on and they want to introduce all these little details kind of about how like, yes, Violet is an addict and she's suffering from cancer and she's behaving badly, obviously, but also it's like everyone in this family has their own issues and is problematic in their own way. Yeah.
And it's also a lot of, you know, Julia Roberts, Barbara trying to wrangle everyone and keep them together. And it for me, it becomes hard to justify her as being like a supporting actress in this, but you know,
we'll talk about that too later.
Yeah, I know. And it's sort of at a certain point, it feels like Meryl is just like operating as the scene stealing supporting standout sort of thing, even though I think she is still a lead too. So it's an interesting dynamic, but
I think so too. Yeah. And she ends the movie too with her own big scene, and there's always music involved, I think, too, in some of her bigger scenes, but then she's just, you know, all of her girls are gone and she's alone. And that's, I think, a really painful end and moment for the character, but it is, I would say, like kind of hard to care about her as a person.
I think so. Yeah. It is very messy, but by the end, I think you feel how Violet justifies her choices as her just looking out for herself, you know?
Right.
And I think Meryl does communicate that kind of pathology very well.
Yeah,
Of,
I think so too.
yeah, someone who needs further treatment, I think. So
Yeah.
that's what I would recommend to Violet.
Yeah, there are a lot of things I'd recommend to our dear Violet, and that is one of them.
Okay, well, shall we move on to our winner?
Yes, it's
Much
time
to discuss. It's time. All
Yeah.
right. Cate Blanchett in Blue Jasmine. Cate Blanchett winning her second Oscar here, but her first in Best Actress. Also, actually, fun trivia fact for you before we move forward. This is the first time since Jessica Lange's win for Blue Sky that we've had someone who previously won a supporting actress Oscar, then winning lead for her second Oscar.
Oh,
So,
and both have blue in the title.
yes, they do. And
How
both
weird.
are vaguely Blanche Dubois inspired.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But to catch up with Cate Blanchett, we last talked about her on the 2007 episode for her performance in Elizabeth the Golden Age. So wild that this is the first time we're going to be talking about a non-Elizabeth performance from Cate, but here we are. In between that and Blue Jasmine, she played a villain in the fourth Indiana Jones movie. She was the co-lead in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. She entered a bit of an action era with things like Robin Hood and Hannah and The Hobbit, where she came back as Galadriel. But she actually did quite a bit of theater, mostly in this time period. She directed Blackbird for the Sydney Theatre Company and starred in their productions of The War of the Roses, Uncle Vanya, and most importantly, A Streetcar Named Desire as Blanche Dubois, which certainly factors into what we'll be talking about with Blue Jasmine. So, Blue Jasmine is a Woody Allen movie. Haven't talked about one of his performances in this category since all the way back in 1978 with Geraldine Page for Interiors, plus Diane Keaton's win for Annie Hall the year prior. So, yeah, it's been quite a while. But in Blue Jasmine, Cate plays Jeanette Francis, who prefers to go by Jasmine. So Jasmine is used to a very wealthy lifestyle, but she's left more or less broke after her husband is indicted for fraud. So she loses everything and flies from New York to San Francisco to stay with her much less wealthy sister, Ginger, Sally Hawkins, who's dating a kind of brutish man named Chili, Bobby Cannavale. And she and Chili spar a bit, and Jasmine tries to figure out how to rebuild her life, which includes having to take a menial receptionist job at a dentist's office and trying to take online courses. But she starts to fully unravel after a while, but finding a little bit of hope upon meeting this diplomat. But she lies about her backstory, which only leads to more unraveling and ruin in the end. So, yes, I know you'll have a lot to say about this, so I'm excited to hear your thoughts on Cate Blanchett as an actress and her Oscar-winning performance.
Yeah, so I'm honestly obsessed with Cate Blanchett. She's such a talented actor. I think she's so funny. I love a lot of the projects that she takes. I mean, some more than others, obviously. She's one of my style icons. I just watch everything that she's in, really.
Even Borderlands?
And I was just going to say, except for Borderlands, I did give that a little skip.
Okay.
But so maybe I'm not a flawless fan here, but I love Cate Blanchett so much. I think she has this regal quality to her that reminds me a lot of Katharine Hepburn and some of the actresses that we, have talked about before from old Hollywood, but also I think she's just such, if we look at her recent performances like in Tar and in Carol and in Blue Jasmine, I think she is just doing some of the best work. It's very emotionally layered and fun to watch too. You can't, I think, see her making choices as an actor. Like that facade, I think, like fully drops away and you feel like you are just watching, again, it's so cliche to say, but like you feel like you're watching a real person or you feel like you're really watching this character, even though you do still see Cate Blanchett. But there's just so much, again, power and sophistication in her, and she's just, again, incredibly funny. I love when you can feel her sense of humor in the work. And I also really like how, for me at least, like in Blue Jasmine, I see this, yes, as a Woody Allen movie, but I primarily see this as a Cate Blanchett movie. It feels like she is actually elevating this material at every turn. She's making decisions that take this character to a place that I think the script doesn't. And it's through her performance that I feel like we really come to understand and know Jeanette/Jasmine as this very complicated woman who is, really, I think, like, she does not apologize for anything. We can talk about that. She has this very troubled past. She's having a nervous breakdown, but I never ever feel when I'm watching this like she's gone too far in terms of communicating that with the audience. And I think this role for me, it's so tricky as she goes back and forth from this perfect Upper East Side housewife to just feeling completely uncomfortable in her new environment. And she is my favorite Best Actress winner of the 2010s.
High praise. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I pretty much agree with you on a lot of that. I think this is an unimpeachable performance. It's obviously a very juicy role, and I think, most actresses would kill for a role like this, especially with how much of a showcase it is. But I do think in the wrong hands, I think this character would be absolutely insufferable, obnoxious, annoying, try hard, and just coming across as inauthentic, honestly, but Cate, I think, just totally knocks it out of the park and just relishes every opportunity to play into every little flaw, every idiosyncrasy, and really creates a fully fleshed human being, who is just a train wreck in human form. Like, would I want to talk to Jasmine in real life? Absolutely not. She would yap my ear off and after a while forget I was even there. So, but...
See, I want to. Okay. I want to sit next to her on the plane. Well, if it's Cate Blanchett, like I would totally just sit there and hear every word.
Yes, if it's specifically Cate Blanchett in character, sure.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm just endlessly fascinated by this woman at the same time. Like, Cate said that she did a lot of people watching to prepare for this. And I feel like I'm in the position as a viewer of like people watching her and how she just like makes mistake after mistake and has little to no self-awareness. And it is funny just how clueless she is at times. But there is also this layer of fragility to it that she brings where she just can't bring herself to accept what's happened to her, and she can't let go of her pride. And so she's kind of just going on with the facade that she's got things under control, that she has a plan, but she is just flying by the seat of her pants and like barely containing her emotions in most social situations, and is almost always on the brink of collapse. And so, I'm always going to be fascinated by that. And I'll also say that I saved this film for last in my rewatches, as I always do with The Winner. And pretty much as soon as the first scene started, I was like, of course, like this was the only choice this year for this category. Like it's just like you look at the first scene of her yapping on the plane and you're like, yeah, she's taking it. That's it.
Yeah, it does feel like that. I also saved it for last. I watched them, in order that we talked about them today. And yeah, it is. It's like when that scene starts, it's absolutely flawless how she's so nervous, it seems. And also it's like, right away, I think at least like that she doesn't know this woman. There is, I think it starts to like you start and you could, I think like, okay, who is she telling? Who is this person who's sitting with her that she wants to tell her life story about? But it's also, I think, such a great way to dole out the exposition at the beginning to not only learn a little bit of the details about this woman, but to learn she's a very unreliable narrator and who she is. And it's also so funny that it is a typical Woody Allen character intro in a lot of ways. Absolutely. Like he'll do that, like a very, very neurotic character just babbling on about their background or, in meeting another character, which is something I really love about a number of his films and with getting to know those characters. And here, I think it works so well. Just even what she's wearing too, and how she says Louis Vuitton when her luggage comes around, and she won't even, and the conversation like extends off the plane. Like this poor woman is next to her, like on the moving walkway, and then at luggage, and finally the other woman's like, okay, my family's there, I gotta go. No. You need to find someone else to talk to. I think it is just like, it's a perfect introduction to the character and to Blanchett's performance style in the movie.
Yeah, it's just such an immediate, vivid character. All her mannerisms and the kind of prissiness and the sort of privileged, affected tone of voice.
Yeah.
And
the
total
voice. Yeah.
Yeah. The self-absorption as she's just like, again, yammering on and on. As if to say, like, of course you would be interested in my life, you know, total stranger. All the neuroticism, like, it's so fully formed. And then her utter disgust when she first enters her sister's place.
Oh my God.
As if she's like living in squalor, when it's just like a perfectly homey apartment, as she says. It's homey. That's the best she can come up with. It's just such specific character work.
Even when she's outside of the apartment, when she first gets dropped off there, she looks like a lost puppy. She's just, she has no idea where to go, like a kid. Like it's like she needs to be within the safety of the apartment. Like she will not just be on the sidewalk with her Louis Vuitton luggage and her Chanel necklaces and her Birkin. Like she needs to be inside immediately. And then when she gets in there and she's so horrified. I'm also laughing because so much of this, it just is funny to me. Like it is this like Upper East Side stereotype fish out of water situation again. But I think she also really smartly plays with the flashbacks in the movie, because as she gets into that apartment and then we jump back to Hal showing her that gorgeous, huge Upper East Side apartment on the park, seeing how she reacts to that and how she behaves when they're, at their beach house and she's talking about their wealth and, how they have more than others. It puts you right back into like how she would feel at Ginger's, and also like what kind of ungrateful woman she is. The fact that she doesn't have money anymore. Her sister, who she seriously screwed over, is taking her in, and all she can do is just look around like, ugh, I'm disgusted. Why am I here?
And also she flew first class.
Right, and she gives that guy a huge tip.
Yep.
She's like and of course it's like she has so much like it really is like the money talks, wealth whispers kind of thing with the designer labels at this point, because she is just like every single piece of clothing that she's wearing is expensive. Like even her belt. It's like, come on, we need to get rid of these things. And then as she launches into that whole piece about, oh, Uncle Sam took everything from me. This is so difficult. I can't get rid of my furs and my gems anymore. It's so... Yeah, I love the character, as despicable as she can feel at times, which does go right, like it does play nicely with Blanche Dubois, and we can talk about Streetcar and everything later, but yeah, I think it works really nicely when you think about her as a character too.
Mm-hmm. It's just delicious. And those flashbacks with her in her happier days, she's so easy breezy and kind of flitting about and walking on air and just perfectly happy to look the other way with her husband's shady business dealings, and even dismissive at first of, Ginger warning her that her husband might be flirting with another woman. It's sort of the Carmela Soprano type of thing, where she's just like so interested in keeping her lifestyle and her wealth, and it's easier for her to just be blissfully ignorant about all the messier parts that factor into that. And obviously, like you said, causing some real collateral damage when she tries to involve Ginger and her husband in Hal's business, and seemingly has these like charitable intentions, but her ignorance is ultimately what leads to her screwing over her sister completely. And I do think she really communicates that kind of like rich person disconnect like that
Mm-hmm.
cognitive dissonance that we see sometimes of
Yeah.
she's just like thinking on a completely different realm of reality, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she gets so hung up on the details from her past, and she just like can't actually exist in the present and face
Yeah.
reality in the way that it is. Like, and it's such an important detail too, like how the song keeps coming up. She keeps talking about Blue Moon and that being so important to her, and then like changing her name from Jeanette to Jasmine because Jeanette has no panache. Very, very, very Lydia Tar there. But her whole life is a performance, right? Like she was even performing when she was in Manhattan, like when she was on the Upper East Side as this rich woman, like she had created an entirely new identity for herself. Yep. And so now that identity there are cracks in it and she can't fully perform it in the way that she was used to, I think now she has to face, right? And that's where a lot of the fun in the script and the performance comes in, is like, okay, I'm still trying to perform as this person, as this woman that I became so good at, like emulating before, but I don't have the resources anymore to do that. So what am I going to do? I'm going to turn my nose up at every single person and thing around me. Like lines of work, she's so critical about that, and she needs to find like a real job and a real career, whatever that means. And like that scene when she goes to oh my god, when she goes to lunch with Ginger and Chili brings that guy, and she is just like the scene also goes on so long, which I think is so great and purposeful there. But she is so uncomfortable. It's like, oh, how could this woman ever stand this? And when he tries to hug her and she jumps, it's so
perfect. Good. Yes. And the scene where she's with Ginger and just totally dismissing the idea of taking a menial job as a receptionist is just so funny in her delivery, especially when she launches into this tangent about how she had to take a job with, selling shoes and having to serve women she once hosted, and the whole bit about Erica and how Erica saw her and felt sorry for her and thought she could slip away undetected. But I saw you, Erica.
I saw you, Erica. It's so good. Oh my God. There are so many lines from this movie that I still quote and have quoted since I first saw it back then. And that is the number one, as I saw you, Erica. And also one from earlier that I do is when she says, "Can you believe I had to move out of my beautiful home and take a place in Brooklyn?" And the way she says Brooklyn is so like, it's like she had to move to like the pits of hell. Like how could she ever be in Brooklyn of all places?
God, embarrassing. Yes. Yeah, the way she just goes full-throated in her delivery in scenes like that is so perfect. And she just, again, this is another case of really modulating so many of those monologues in the film so well, especially when she's having a conversation with someone, but then something switches and she just like transitions into talking to herself and like talking out loud and venting her feelings without any self-awareness. And that's what makes it funny, but there's also something really tragic in how she is just not getting the help she needs, and she just can't handle the humiliation of what's happened to her, and so something just snapped in her, and it hasn't repaired itself. Yeah. And everything she's doing is not helping.
Right. And you see that in the reactions from the other people, like on the sidewalk, like after she takes the job with the dentist and she's just in those scrubs on the sidewalk talking to herself, and you see the other people, or when she's at that party later on and she starts talking to herself and one of the men says, were you talking to me? Like those parts I think are really sad because she's self-medicating with her Stoli martinis. She is
with a
refusing
twist of lemon.
With a twist of lemon, yeah, like any good one knows. And she is just like refusing to face the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I know. But and she gets that bit of hope with Peter Sarsgaard at the party, and you just see that relief on her face that she's having a semi-sophisticated conversation with someone that she clearly is seeing as like finally someone speaking my language. But there's this look of self-loathing and pride that flashes across her face when he asks for more details about her life, and she completely lies about her husband being like a surgeon who died, and she doesn't have a kid, and she's an interior decorator, and I don't know, you just feel this layer of guilt, I think, as she leads him on in this way. But I think there's a part of her that is just so lonely and assumes that he won't want to have anything to do with her if she shows him the real her, that it really is sad.
I know. And then you start thinking too, like, what is the real her even anymore, right? Like, does she even know? And I love how Blanchett, she takes like such deliberate, dramatic little pauses when she's telling a lie. Yeah. And it's just like certain words will change, or the choices that she makes there with the lies are always so good. And it also reminds me a lot of Lydia Tarr and her performance there, because she's not actually that convincing. She doesn't really have that much game, and that's why it's so fun to watch. Like when she gets the call from Dwight, like she's freaking out because he hasn't called her, and then Chili has ripped the phone off the wall even. The kids have lost her cell phone. And then when she finally picks up and she's like, "Can you hang on? I'm in the middle of something." And it's like, this woman has nothing to do. But then she takes these little dramatic breaths. She's like, okay, like almost like she's counting to 3. And then she's like, all right, I'm back. Here I am. What do you need? Can you pick me up at the Fairmont?
So smooth. Yes. Also, we do have to talk about the scene at the diner where she's like babysitting Ginger's kids.
Oh my God.
And just goes off on this monologue about being rich and just the responsibilities of being rich and making sure they tip big, boys.
Oh my God.
And, you know, talking to these like dumb preteen boys, like they're friends at like a social gathering, and they're looking at her like, I don't know what the hell this woman is talking about, but she is absolutely out of her mind. But she just keeps going and going and going. And the way she looks at them so bleakly as she says, anxiety, nightmares, and a nervous breakdown. There's only so many traumas a person can withstand until they take to the streets and start screaming.
I love that scene. It's so, I mean, tip big boys, another great line that I say. But also I just love how she's so, like when she's in the middle of one of these episodes or moments where she's talking to these boys who also have like very funny pointed questions for her throughout the movie. And she's just like sweating. Like she's like, I can't do this, but here is my entire monologue about what you need to know about wealth in the world. Yep. And they're just like, why am I listening to you? What are you saying right now? We're at Chuck E. Cheese. Like,
Yeah, and of course everything is just unraveling from there when the Peter Sarsgaard character is finding out the truth of who she is, and he breaks it off with her, and just the panic of once again losing it all, and just the desperation to salvage something there when there's no hope that there will be anything salvaged is, again, like you don't fully want to sympathize with her, but you empathize in some degree of what she's going through, because I think all of us have been in some, not necessarily this kind of situation, but just the anxiety kind of like not being able to control this situation and knowing that this one area of your life is something you've been trying to work on and it's just there's something not clicking in.
Right.
So
yeah. And she's so comically close to her old life, or a version of that, like literally seeing the rings when it all comes undone. And then you just think to yourself, which does end up coming to fruition, you're like, okay, like this is the new lie she's going to tell. She's going to be like, oh, Dwight, like, oh, this man I met at a party, I'm an interior decorator for him. And you just start to, again, see it start to unravel. But now she has this different tragic story to attach to.
Bleak.
It is so bleak. Yeah. I like that we don't have some happy resolution with this character either. I think it's fitting for the film where she ends up at the end of it.
On that park bench, muttering to herself after the woman there just is like, I'm not going to deal with this. Like, I already know where this is going.
Yeah. She's like, I just sat down to read the paper. Like, I need to move. This woman with a Chanel jacket and wet hair sitting here talking to herself. Let's go.
Oh, God. Yeah. But it's just a tour de force performance. It really, really is. As much as you can say that about certain performances, this is just, again, such a gift, and she completely relishes it and is genuinely like the perfect person for this role. Like, I truly cannot imagine anyone else in it.
Yeah, it really is like the perfect marriage of role and actor, considering her extensive work on the stage and just her, I think, her physical presence and what she brings to the role there. But I mean, she makes a meal out of the entire thing, and it's a towering performance. And yeah, like you said, it's this movie to me, it's a Cate Blanchett film as much as it's a Woody Allen film.
Agreed. All right, let's get to these Oscars and explore why Cate Blanchett won. So for the precursors, we got another clean sweep to talk about here, because Cate absolutely dominated this race. Really wasn't even close. She won New York Film Critics, LA Film Critics, National Society of Film Critics, a lot of regional film critics, just total domination. And I think like Sandra won one or two maybe, but really not much else for anyone outside of just Cate and a little bit for Sandra. So that was the race basically. But with the major precursors, the march continued onward as she won the Critics' Choice, the Golden Globe for Drama, SAG, and BAFTA. But as for the others, Sandra was actually nominated everywhere. Judi was nominated everywhere. Meryl was nominated everywhere except BAFTA. None of them won anything major. And Amy Adams won the Golden Globe for comedy, and she was nominated at BAFTA, but she didn't get in at Critics' Choice or SAG. So it was a bit of an up and down road for Amy to get this nomination. Either way, Cate was pretty much locked and loaded to win this Oscar, her second. So why do we think that, she won this Oscar and that she dominated in the way that she did this year?
I think that it is just, like we said, it is such a dominant tour de force performance that is completely undeniable. And especially I think if you're looking at the other nominees and the films that came out this year, and the performances within those films, this is just the one that it makes sense that everyone would decide to coalesce around it. I think it also helps that, yes, she had, already won an Oscar in supporting. Her competition mostly had two, right? So there isn't that idea of, oh, someone else is overdue, we need to give them another Oscar or their first Oscar. And their films and narratives just weren't as strong. And I think, the movie itself is named after her and her character, and she is the one who is dominating every single scene. She's not really sharing it really with many. There are moments where you'll just have Ginger and Chili, for instance, but for the most part, it's a performance also that I can see really, especially actors loving, but really everyone just seeing the power and the beauty in the performance. And I think she just, again, she goes right up to the line, but she never crosses it. And that's really, really hard to do. So it makes sense, I think, when we think about sweepers in other years, but to sweep industry and get the trifecta with critics, it takes a really special type of performance. And I think that's what this is.
Yeah. To me, this is just one of those kinds of performances like a Charlize Theron in Monster, or like a Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs, or like Meryl Streep in Sophie's Choice, where it's just like, this is clearly the role of the year, in this category at least. And the actress at the center of it is just totally dominating the screen, that there's just no competition. And I feel like people really respected Cate up to this point, but there was something so challenging and on another level in terms of what was asked of her here, that she was just the clear winner. And she really didn't have any downsides, because the performance was there, the respect was there. She had been a little out of the spotlight for a while doing theater in Australia, and then she sort of came back with a bang. I would imagine she got like 80 to 90% of the vote in the end, even though, maybe we can discuss this too, but things could have gotten complicated for her because there was a very public discourse about Woody Allen, because, his daughter, Dylan Farrow, had published a letter in the New York Times in February of 2014, accusing him of sexual abuse. And we saw Cate kind of dance around the Woody Allen of it all in some of her speeches and campaign events, but, still praising him for writing great roles for women and giving her this opportunity. But I feel like she really avoided getting into it too much, Yeah. So it wasn't smooth sailing, at least on a campaign level. And I think, rightfully so. I think those are good conversations that were had. But, there just wasn't enough of an alternative to sort of coalesce behind if that was going to affect things.
Yeah. I do wonder, like, if that had come out earlier, if it would have affected everything more. But I think that, with the timing of everything and also the climate during that time in particular at the Oscars, I don't really think it would have made too much of a difference in terms of voting. I think today that could be a different story. But back then, I think, I don't know. And I remember that too, of how she was responding to that and how I think some people were critical of her not addressing it full on, like head on. And I watched an interview actually with her through the New York Times. And at the very end, it said this interview was published before the release of the letter. Like they had that little disclaimer there. And it said like, we reached out to Woody Allen, but there was no comment.
But, I think there was a possibility that there could have been like a late surge for Amy Adams since her film was hot at the time, and Sandra Bullock had the benefit of her film being beloved and went on to win 7 Oscars. But I think it was just the performance from Cate that was that's what it comes down to. Yeah. It's just too strong to deny. Yeah. And she has a great speech. I've watched that speech many times. Yes.
The world is round, people.
The world is round, people. And the whole bit about like, speech. Making people sit down. They're too old to be standing and all that. And praising her Notes on a Scandal co-star Judi Dench, who wasn't there because she was off filming the second best Exotic Marigold Hotel. That's such a lovely moment. So great stuff.
Yeah. Great. Love Cate Blanchett, of course.
Yes.
In this performance.
All right. Shall we get to our questions?
I can't wait. I'm very excited for
we got
many of these.
I know. All right. Let's start with AJ Box. I think this lineup has 5 A-list stars, but except for Cate and Sandra, their performances are from mediocre to just meh. Any other years where the nominees in the category were more about their renown than the actual quality of their performances?
Honestly, I think the year you just covered, 2011,
that is what my answer was going to be, yes.
Pretty good example of this. Yeah. Meryl Streep for The Iron Lady, Glenn Close for Albert Nobbs. I mean, even Michelle Williams for My Week with Marilyn. Like you can, I think, pretty much across the board, with the exception of Rooney Mara, say that like it was mostly star power.
Yeah.
I do like Viola. I do like Viola Davis in The Help, but I think that has a lot of complications to it too, and I don't love that movie. So yeah.
Yeah, that's my answer. So there you go.
There we go.
Andy Bayless said, would Cate still win today with the climate around Woody Allen? How good are you at separating art from the artist? Big question.
This is a tough one. Yeah, I think so. The first thing is that I think like Woody Allen movies in general are complicated for me because like and I'll admit, I moved to New York because of Annie Hall and Manhattan, like watching those when I was really young, like growing up and thinking like this is the most beautiful, glamorous place in the world. And I won't be fully alive until I live in New York. Like I totally got that from those movies. And also like, I don't think I would be doing any of this without his movies because they taught me how to watch movies in a lot of ways. And I do, agree with Cate Blanchett that some of my favorite female characters and performances come from older Woody Allen movies. I don't think, so I'll say like, I don't think she'd make a movie with Woody anymore. Like if we're thinking of like current climate and everything, or that this would be able to get the financing to get a Sony Pictures Classics release. So I think like that, he can't get financing for movies he wants to make in Europe now or get distribution around those. So I feel like I would actually be curious, like, how many people in the industry would really care when it came down to it, because I'm always dubious of that, and if it's, like, a real thing in the industry or it's just a very, like, online thing. But I do think it changes things significantly, just given the fall he's had since 2013. And then separating the art from the artist and everything like that, I think it's really up to the person how they want to choose to separate the art from the artist. And I think that like some instances are easier for people than others. For me, though, when I'm thinking about historical films or like films from the past, I would say I'm pretty good at it. Like if I'm thinking of just anything that was made, you know, from the 30s onward, you have pretty terrible people at the helm of these projects, whether they're in producer roles, directors, actors who are attached. I think we should and can acknowledge that like bad people can make pretty influential art. And I think that a relationship to something, you know, from the past, like I will look at that and know all of that information and will engage with the art on its level, you know, looking at what we can learn from the filmmaking and what came from that and how it might have influenced other filmmakers. And, you know, there are other people attached to the movies too. So I want to see like the performances and to see the cinematography and all of those elements too. And I feel like, yeah, I just try to stay away from limited ways to look at art. I try to really engage with it fully. And I think sometimes like certain conversations around problematic, right, artists, especially online, they feel very oriented around virtue signaling and who can be at the top of moral high ground mountain. And I'm pretty disinterested in that. So
I agree.
But I think like it's up to every individual person. That's my distilled down answer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well argued. I think in terms of separating art from the artist, I agree with the sentiment of it to a certain extent. I have said this before, but I do think it's easier with directors and people behind the scenes compared to actors because you don't have to see them and be reminded of them. But yeah, art and those who make it are different things sort of inherently, even if they're also kind of linked in their own way, obviously. I think I'm generally okay with it as long as I don't feel like I'm financially supporting someone who I truly think is a monster or who I'm very opposed to or is just doing bad things, past or present, you know.
That's the money part of it is big. Like, I will never pay to see another Johnny Depp movie. Like, just to give an example, like that's just a personal one for me. And again, I think that also connects with the actor thing and just like seeing them in the film just feels different.
Yeah. Well, Lawrence Stern said, "Why didn't critics call out Blue Jasmine for what it was? Woody's obvious ripoff of the entire A Streetcar Named Desire plot and main characters."
I think it's actually a good question because I do there are a lot of similarities and I think they probably should be explored with more depth. I think there are some differences. Like, for example, we don't have there would have been this sexual tension between Jasmine and Chili, for instance, and that would have been totally explored, and that's not here, right? This, I think, is much more influenced by the financial crisis a few years before than it is really by A Streetcar Named Desire, but I do think, people probably should have engaged with that more, but I think also, Woody Allen and Cate Blanchett and a lot of people involved did try to deny the influence on it. Well, specifically, she said in an interview that it did come to mind for her, but that they never discussed it. And she also mentioned that she was also reading Richard II, who she had played before on stage and was fascinated about that and thinking about, quote, being the character being the agent of her own downfall. So I think she's really mostly interested in broad theatrical work and some other plays too, but it's kind of funny because it is totally Streetcar in so many ways.
I mean, I do think there were critics who pointed it out. I don't know about calling it out. I think I mean, they can say whatever they want, but for me, it sort of wears those references on its sleeve pretty deliberately, it feels. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Isaiah Reeves said, Vivian Leigh in Streetcar Named Desire or Cate Blanchett in Blue Jasmine.
Oh, you know, this is hard for me because I do love them both, but I have to go Vivian Leigh because this is, if not my favorite Best Actress winning role, one of them. It goes back and forth, but I would lean Vivian. I think also just what she brought to the performance and the context and history around it with her style, I really appreciate. So I would go Vivien Leigh.
Yeah, I still prefer Vivien, but it's closer than you think.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that.
I think so.
Yeah. Celluloid Siren said, does Cate give the best performance in an Alan movie ever? Big
These
question
questions are all putting my favorite people up against each other.
Why are we pitting these girls against each other?
Not all of my girls being pitted against each other. That's what Best Actress really is, though, really, right? If you think about it.
Let's be honest. Yeah.
I would say my favorite performances from Woody Allen movies are still Diane Keaton in Annie Hall, Manhattan, and Manhattan Murder Mystery is a little swerve. Okay. I think the way she balances comedy and drama is just so brilliant in those. And honestly, I know she won for Annie Hall, but I still feel like she doesn't get enough credit for her work in those movies because one, in Annie Hall, it's based loosely and, on her. And so people give her that label of like, oh, she's playing herself. But I mean, that really is a period defining performance and has influenced so many actors and films to come. So I would still go Diane and Annie Hall, but Cate is definitely the top of the modern era for me and a totally understandable pick for number one. She's definitely in my, outside of Diane Keaton, she's next in line.
Well, I haven't seen every Woody Allen movie, obviously, but at the very least, I do think...
There's so many, too.
There are so many. There's like 50. But I do think it is the best lead performance just distilled in a Woody Allen movie. I'll say that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great supporting people that I love. Especially Diane Wiest, and both of her wins are just top tier for me.
Both great.
Trojan Sailor said, if there was any possible way Cate lost here, would she have been a slam dunk for Tar or maybe even Carol?
I don't think so, actually. I know that's probably... I know there are people who think, like, if she didn't win this, she would have won for Tar. I mean, she also won the trifecta there with the critics. But I think the love for Everything Everywhere All at Once was just too strong at the end of the day with the Oscars. And I don't know. I mean, I obviously, I love her performance in Tar. I've talked about it many times. And I would have, loved that win for her on her resume. But, it wasn't happening. And I don't think this would have changed it.
Yeah, I think even though, neither Carol nor Tar won any Oscars, so it's hard to say how much the Academy loved them. Seemed like they loved Tar a little more, but I truly don't think anything was stopping Everything Everywhere from sweeping. As far as
Jamie
Carol,
Lee Curtis won.
Jamie Lee Curtis won. Thank you. Yes, that's the proof. But I think she could have won for Carol, and the fact that she didn't win more is probably down to her sweeping just 2 years earlier for this. So, yeah. I think it could have been a race between her and Brie Larson, maybe. I don't know. We'll cover that in a few episodes, so we'll see. Sean said, how did Amy Adams not get this Oscar? Genuine question.
I think it's like what we talked about with why Cate Blanchett won. It really is just her sweeping the season, the quality of the performance, her domination, and also, if we also think about Amy Adams too, and, the other nominees, Sandra Bullock for Gravity, that movie is a lot stronger than American Hustle is too, so I think there are a lot of factors at play, but mostly just Cate Blanchett's domination.
Yeah, Cate was undeniable. There was no stopping her. There was nothing anyone could have done. Okay, Christoph said, after Junebug, which was almost 20 years ago, Amy Adams only received nominations for films with 3 or more acting noms and was snubbed whenever she was her film's only acting contender. Does the Academy maybe not like her that much, but merely likes the film she's in?
Yeah, I mean, I really do think the Academy does just like her movies. I think that is a big part of it. If you do look at that and think about where she's been nominated, and I know that's, a lot of that's wrapped up in the narrative of her too, of why hasn't she won an Oscar? But if you really sit down and look at it, it starts to make more sense as to why she didn't.
Yeah, it's an interesting observation. I do think any actress who gets 6 Oscar nominations is loved. So I'll just note that. But I also feel like the Academy clearly doesn't see her as that sort of undeniable, full-on powerhouse, undeniable kind of performer on the level of, Cate or Nicole Kidman or like that sort of thing, like her contemporaries. I think it also may be that she is just a pretty subtle actress most of the time, and she is not kind of like that diva powerhouse type, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
That could make it easy for her to be overlooked, I guess.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, Steve, no, not that Steve, the other one, said, given Amy Adams' level of fame and number of career Oscar nods, it's wild that this is her only lead nomination. Does the Academy see her as a leading lady or a character actress? And how do you see her?
I think this is also interesting because I see her as a leading lady. Mm-hmm. I definitely see her as a lead. Like when I think of her, she is one of, I think especially when we grew up and we're starting to cover the Oscars, that's definitely how I see her. But I don't necessarily know if that's how the Academy sees her. Similar to how you just answered the question before, I think of like with her contemporaries.
Yeah.
It's a combination probably of role and style and a number of other things. But yeah. And it's different when you look at how other voting bodies see her too, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I do just see her as a versatile actress who can do both, but is much more leading lady at this point than character actress by any means. But it would be fun to see her do more like character-ish work. Just,
I think so.
Getting to explore some weirder territory, which she apparently is doing in Night Bitch as well. So I don't know, haven't seen it yet. But
Me
yeah,
either.
when you look at her Oscar record, it's like, is this woman like the Thelma Ritter of this generation? Like she's getting all these supporting nominations. What's going on here? But you wouldn't think that she would be like one of the best leading ladies that is constantly like above the title,
Right.
Emily Nesbitt said, people go on and on about Amy Adams not having an Oscar, but has she actually deserved to win, in your opinion?
I actually would have given her the win for The Master. I love that performance.
Likely thing for you to say.
Likely thing. I think she's better than Anne Hathaway and Les Mis.
How dare you?
So, I know, I'm sorry.
Crushing her dream. Yes.
It didn't come true in my world.
It didn't come true. Wow. Now I'm just picturing you muttering to yourself on a park bench like Jasmine.
Oh my God, like Jasmine. My Stoli Martini.
Yes. Being like, well, Amy Adams, of course, should have won for The Master, but...
Who is this woman talking about?
Yes. For me, it's Junebug. I think she should have won for her first nomination. I think that's a great performance. Little scene.
I like that one too.
But yeah, Miles McHale, this is still Amy's only lead nomination, other than the obvious Arrival debacle. What lead performance should she have been nominated for?
I mean, my other favorite of hers is actually Enchanted.
That's mine. No shame in that.
Let's give her a nomination for Enchanted.
I think we should. And I think I might replace Kate in Elizabeth the Golden Age with Amy Adams.
I actually might too.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So, well, Francisco said, I would love to see Amy Adams in a Todd Haynes film. What role in a previous Haynes movie do you think she would have excelled in?
I love this question. I think we should put her in the Natalie Portman role in May, December, because I think there would actually be something really fascinating if you had her and Julianne Moore opposite of each other and you gave them both their natural red hair. Because I know Julianne's blonde in the movie, but I really like the idea of that, especially with how it plays with doubles.
That is a great answer. Wow.
Thank you.
One that I wish had happened, even though I love Natalie in that role, one of her best.
Yeah.
But, I think she would actually fit in really well in a lot of them, like Far From Heaven, Safe. Certainly feel like they could be possibilities too. I also wouldn't have minded seeing her as Therese in Carol, playing off of Kate in that way. I think
could
would
see
be
that too.
Good. Okay, Liam said loads of other actresses were considered for Sandra Bullock's role in Gravity, including previous nominees and winners, Jolie, Portman, Cotillard, Mulligan, and Watts. Do you think any of these get Oscar nods if they take this role?
I think so. I think you can see that with, just with the success of Gravity and the dominance of the role. But it is an odd nomination because a lot of times the technical science fiction juggernaut does not bring along actors. if we're thinking about nominations.
Right.
So
I know.
it feels kind of like a Sandra Bullock exclusive thing here that's happening in part, because of the quality of her performance, but also because of the afterglow of her Blindside win. So I don't know. I think even though some of these would have been interesting, I feel like this is a unique thing that happened because she was Sandra Bullock.
Yeah. I mean, I thought about just because she got in the year prior for a physical role that Naomi Watts could potentially do that if she really committed to it, really intensely, like she does with most of her films, good or bad. I did think of Angelina Jolie just in terms of star power, and I think she could bring that level of emotion, but probably not any of the others. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, both Kyle and Christoph, are there more cases like Sandra Bullock in which what you might call the Afterglow nomination is leaps and bounds better than the film she won the Oscar for?
I mean, this was hard. I was looking through, and her career isn't an exact mirror. It's very different, but I think Katharine Hepburn's win for The Lion in Winter is miles better than Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. That was the one I saw where I just thought, okay, this is a big jump up in terms of quality. And I think it's the opposite. It's also interesting sometimes too, where they have a great nomination and then they win the next year for something terrible. Yeah.
Yep. Happens. Yeah. I would also say almost all of Bette Davis's nominations in the 40s and the 50s and 1962 are better than Dangerous, and most I would even put higher than Jezebel. So that would be one for me.
That's a good one too.
A bunch of people had this question. We got Dan B, Champ Reviewer, Ghost of Glenda, Miss Jackson If You Nasty, Bitsy Von Muffling. Basically, if Sandra Bullock hadn't won for The Blind Side, do you think she could have won for Gravity?
I really think Kate was such a juggernaut that it wouldn't have really mattered. I think we get it in our heads that actress, is sometimes the actress attached to the film with the most support can win, but that's so rare, and it's really happened in recent years, and I don't really think this was close, and I also don't think the Academy was itching to award Sandra Bullock. So yeah, like you talked about in your episode with Nick, that year was such a mixed bag, right, of campaigning and big box office, peaking at the right time. So yeah, I don't really think it affects much here.
Yeah. I personally just think, as great as we think the performance is, it's just not the kind of performance that wins.
Yeah.
Just straight up. It's just, it would have been such an anomaly if she won for Gravity.
Yeah.
So
I think
she would have been two-time nominee Sandra Bullock, and I think she would be perfectly fine with that. Yeah. Miles McHale said, have you now or ever had Philomania?
I had Philomania when I was watching it, and I still have Philomania now. Yes.
Wow. Yes. And if people don't know the reference, this is something Leonardo DiCaprio said when he was announcing, I believe at the Golden Globes, possibly is where this was, but announcing it as Philomania. Yeah. Philomania, I've had it off and on since 2013. It never truly leaves your body once you have it. So
no, it's always there.
It's always there. Okay, Sean said, is Judi in Philomena the last great Sunday matinee Best Actress nomination?
Yes, if we're thinking of great nominations. I think there have been some more, there's Florence Foster Jenkins, but I'm not gonna call that one great.
Not great, Bob. Yeah, looking forward to that. But you know what? I would put in The Wife as maybe not a great movie, but certainly a great Sunday matinee experience.
And nomination. I agree with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think The Eyes of Tammy Faye has some elements of that as well.
Oh, yeah.
But, not saying great, just saying that it's within
Judi, a little bit.
Actually, the one I wanted to throw out for you is, I think if Netflix didn't have it, one movie that would have been a perfect Sunday matinee is Nyad.
Yeah, I agree with that. Totally. Yes, Nyad.
Yep, just saying. Jamie said, this being Judi's final lead nomination so far, can you please rank her Best Actress nominated performances? Have you seen all of them?
I'm going to go Notes on a Scandal, Iris, Mrs. Brown, Philomena, Mrs. Henderson Presents.
Wow. Okay. I have a slightly different lineup, but similar first and fifth.
Okay.
Number 1 with a bullet is Notes on a Scandal.
Yes.
Number 2 for me is Philomena.
Oh,
Genuinely.
I love that.
It's beautiful. Number 3 is Mrs. Brown. Number 4 is Iris. All great nominations. And number 5 is Mrs. Henderson Presents, which she didn't need that nomination.
No. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, Top Dog, Bottom Dog said August Osage County is legitimately one of the best plays ever written. The movie is unwatchable. What happened? Was the director just unable to rein in his cast? Was he unable to tell Meryl no? Who do I blame?
This is a great point and an obvious, what went wrong. I think it's a problem with the direction and some of the casting. I think it's just more suited to the stage than whatever's happening here.
Yeah. I just think there were not enough opportunities taken with the direction to make it cinematic. And maybe it's just there's so many different actors, so many egos there that it may have been difficult to wrangle everyone, so it was hard to make those more creative choices, but yeah. Kevin Clowder said both Cate Blanchett and Meryl Streep play parts in movies inspired by the work of Tennessee Williams. Cast each of these nominees in a Tennessee Williams role you'd like to see them take on.
I think both of them at different points in their careers could have played Amanda Wingfield in The Glass Menagerie. That's a meaty role, and I would be curious what they would do with it.
That's good. I mean, there's obvious ones like, Kate and Streetcar. I think of Meryl Streep going full Anna Magnani Italian in The Rose Tattoo would have been fun. Ben Roberts said, is Streep miscast here or is it just me? Who do you think could have played the role better?
My joking answer was Faye Dunaway because I just want to see it.
Of course.
In all seriousness, though, this has Jessica Lange written all over it for me. It's she was just the first name that popped into my head.
Extremely Jessica Lange coded. Yeah, and Sissy, like I said earlier, or Glenn, just because I want to put her in a good role like that. Eric Anderson said, who defied gravity better? Sandra Bullock in Space or Meryl Streep's eyebrows in Osage County?
So Meryl has a high arch, but Sandy did fight harder. I think if we're talking about Meryl's wig, though, it's maybe tighter competition. That's
true. The higher the wig, the closer to God or whatever.
Closer to space.
Yes. Yeah. Christoph said, if Meryl Streep and Julia Roberts both campaigned in lead, do both get nominated? Also, why did Julia Roberts agree to campaign in supporting despite having more screen time than Meryl?
Yeah, it's pretty egregious category fraud. I don't think they both get in if they are both run in lead. I don't really know, I think, in terms of why Julia did this. It's interesting in recent years we have had this, with actresses saying no, I'm going to go lead instead and proving a point that way, or the studio even proving a point. So, and I doubt I can't even imagine saying that to Harvey Weinstein.
No. Right.
So.
Yeah, I know. I don't think Julia is nominated at the very least. I'll say that if she does go lead. So I guess right strategic move for her, but also totally category fraud. I think Meryl could still squeak in just because she is Meryl, but it would be much tougher for her. Andrew Carden said, recast Violet Weston with a Best Actress nominee from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say here.
Well, you know what I'm going to do for the 40s. We're going with Greer Garson. It's giving Blossoms in the Dust half accent. Let's push her all the way to a full Southern accent.
Hey, I'd like to
full
see it.
Full Plains accent, yeah.
Maybe I'll feel some kind of emotion from it.
It will not be good, but okay. I want to see it anyway.
Yeah. I'll do 50s, mine. Let's go back and forth.
Yeah. That's fun.
For my 40s, it's extremely obvious what I'm going to say, but it's Bette Davis.
Of course. Yeah. She's my real answer. Yeah.
Yes. But appreciate, for me, the Greer mention.
Yeah, I had to. For the 50s, I'm going with Shirley Booth.
Oh, yes.
In part for Andrew Carden, but I feel like she would be perfect in the role. I think she would be. Really nail it. Yeah.
I have Shelley Winters.
Okay. I like that too.
Which is also for Andrew Carden.
Yes. We really, really did well there. For the 60s, I had Geraldine Page.
I had Geraldine Page.
Picture it. Yeah, okay.
She has that theatricality, you know, it's in her blood. So I could easily see it. Let's do 70s.
Okay, this is a choice. But I was recently inspired by my Megalopolis watch, and I'm going to say Talia Shire.
Wow. Okay. I did not see that coming.
No, I mean, especially given how I love the 70s, and I think there are some great choices here, but that's the one I would want to see. I'm just curious.
I'm very intrigued by that. I went with Anne Margaret.
A better choice.
Yes. It would not happen in the 70s, but like in that 90s era when she's playing in like Grumpy Old Men, like that era of Anne Margaret. Let's see her ham it up.
Yes. Yes.
Lord knows she already did enough in Tommy that this will be a piece of cake.
Oh my God, right? Anything's a piece of cake after that.
Yep. The ghost of Glenda, Miss Jackson, if you're nasty, comments, don't forget to eat your fish, eat your fish, eat your fish, eat the fish, bitch.
I will never forget to eat the fish, bitch. It's the best line from the movie.
Yeah, I have never forgotten. And just about every time I make fish for dinner, I can't say that line doesn't enter my brain because
it sure does.
My brain is broken. So Captain Jimmy D said, August Osage County is the last Tony-winning play to receive a Best Actress nom. Which of the other 3 films, aside from Blue Jasmine, which is obviously inspired by Streetcar, would do well if turned into a play or musical? Philomena
seems like a lovely West End play.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. I don't think Gravity would work in that context, but it would be interesting to see them try. I would be scared it would turn into like a Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark situation. Yeah. But, American Hustle, I guess, has its potential there, but they'd have to work out the book there to make that a little more workable. Richard Thompson said, which of the other 4 characters is about to have a nervous breakdown? Which could pull off the best heist? Which could also survive in space? Which would make the best of a devastating trip to another country? Which other is going to be abandoned and die alone?
Okay.
So like we're recasting the situations that the characters
The situations, yes. Okay, so I'm going nervous breakdown, Violet.
Yes.
That just feels right.
Correct.
I'm going best heist, Philomena. I want to see it. I love it. I think she could convince other people, like just through
believe her.
You know? I'd believe her. Survive in space. I went with Sydney from American Hustle.
I think we might have the same combination. Yeah.
Yep. Do you make the best? We know who's not making the best of a devastating trip. No. So Ryan Stone, she is the one there. And then be abandoned and die alone.
You know.
She can handle anything.
She can deal with whatever comes her way. Yeah. And Jasmine
she's dying alone, sadly.
Amar said, which one of these characters would very likely go viral for being a Karen?
I love this question. There are actually quite a few choices, but I went with Violet because I thought of the parakeet death story in the movie. And I just thought, she's bringing these parakeets, like she's telling them about she needs more parakeets because they keep dying.
That's true.
I would go there.
I went with Jasmine just because Violet barely leaves the house anyway, so...
That's true.
Jasmine's out in the world talking to any Tom, Dick, or Harry, so she'll have something to say to someone.
Many of opportunities for her.
Yes. Adam said, who should have presented each nominee at the Oscars 2008 style?
Okay, I have Diane Keaton for Cate Blanchett, obvious.
Naturally.
I have Faye Dunaway for Amy Adams. I just want her back. I have Sigourney Weaver for Sandra Bullock. I know she's not a winner, but I just cheated a little bit. It's fine. I have Meryl for Meryl. I have Nicole Kidman because I know they're really good friends. Yeah. And then I had Maggie Smith for Judi Dench.
Oh, very good.
So I did one cheat pick.
No, that's fine. Well, for Sandra Bullock, I said Nicole Kidman for the Practical Magic reunion.
There we go. I like that.
Yeah. And then if we're doing like the previous year's winner sort of thing, I just said Jennifer Lawrence is already there, so just do it to Amy Adams. It's fine. Maybe she'll have something nice to say. Yeah, for Judi Dench, I like the Maggie Smith one. Yeah. Even though like she never showed up to the Oscars after a while, and neither did Judi, so
right.
Who knows if that would have been what happened. Work. But yeah. I mean, for Meryl, Julia's already there. Julia Roberts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for Cate, tempted to say Jessica Lange, just because, again, like the streetcar stuff there. But
the streetcar,
Yeah, but Diane Keaton. Yeah. Jeffrey Kerr said, at this very Oscars telecast, John Travolta famously screwed Idina Menzel's name as he introduced her performance of Let It Go from Frozen. How do you think he'd screw the names of each of this year's Best Actress nominees?
I had so much fun with this.
Me too.
And I was laughing so hard because the thing with John Travolta here is that there isn't any logic behind it. So you have to just kind of like go with it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we want to like go back and forth, but
sure.
For Amy Adams, I had Amanda Adim.
Wow. Beautiful. For my Amy Adams, I have Miss Saddam.
Oh my God. Okay, for Sandra Bullock, I had Barbara Slock.
The wickedly talented Barbara Slock. I just mixed up letters here and I said Sailor Blondell.
Sailor Blondell. She's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
For Judi Dench, I had Dodie Jem.
Very good. I was tempted to say Judi Dench there, but
I like that. That's good.
But I came up with a fun one here. I have Jean Dujardin.
Stop. Oh, that's so good. I love that.
Yes.
Okay, for Meryl Streep, I have Cheryl Meep.
Beautiful.
Cheryl Meep.
Cheryl Meep.
She's been nominated so many times. Cheryl's always there.
Oh, that's Cheryl. Yes. I have Melissa Petite.
Melissa Petite.
Yes.
Okay, and my favorite of all, Cate Blanchett. We have Blanche Cancel. She's a drag queen. And her name is Blanche Cancel.
Please welcome to the stage. What's funny is that I had the same first name here. So for Cate Blanchett, I have Blanche Dubois. Just straight up.
There we go. Just straight up. Just thinking character name. That's it.
That is what is on John Travolta's mind. Yes.
Yes. I love that question.
I think we did well there.
Yes.
Joey Gentili recast these 2010s Oscar talents and Karen Black in these roles. Michelle Williams, Rosamund Pike, June Squibb, Frances McDormand.
Well, we had to get a Karen Black question from Joey Gentili, so I was ready. I have for Ryan Stone, I have Michelle Williams. For Philomena, I have June Squibb. Naturally. I actually love the idea of Philomena with June Squibb.
Yeah, I think she could pull it off. Yeah.
Yeah. For Jasmine, I have Rosamund Pike. That's where I put her. I feel like that would be fun.
Absolutely.
For Violet, I have Frances McDormand. I think
would be iconic.
She'd be really good. Yeah, she was actually like one of the actresses I was circling when we were thinking about recasting that role a little bit. And yeah, I think she'd be fun. And then, of course, Karen Black. I have her as Sydney in American Hustle.
Interesting. Yeah. And certainly from that 70s era, I could see her in a role like that. Yeah.
It felt right.
I have a slightly different combination, but a few overlaps there, like absolutely Rosamund Pike in Blue Jasmine. Obviously, June Squibb and Philomena, that just seems natural. I went with Michelle Williams in American Hustle, because I think there could be a bit of a elusiveness there that could work. I went with Frances McDormand in Gravity, which I think would be kind of wild, but she certainly has that Sigourney Weaver kind of like badassness to her, I guess. So could work. And then I have Karen Black in August Osage County, which would be a camp classic.
Absolutely. I think Joey would be happy with that casting.
I think so.
Yeah.
The ghost of Glenda Miss Jackson, if you nasty, said, "What happened to Emma Thompson here? She seemed safe until she wasn't announced."
Well, you know I love Emma Thompson.
Yes.
She's just one of my favorites. And yeah, she really did. And I remember this at the time being really surprised that she didn't make it in, because when I saw that movie, and I think just knowing her stature as an actress, and I do think she's really good in that movie too, it was surprising to me at the time. And it's hard to kind of see the signs, especially I think when you see like some inconsistencies in the nominations that Amy Adams got and also that Meryl got, just looking across the board at precursors. But I think they didn't really like the movie. If we look just at performance overall for Saving Mr. Banks, we just had the Thomas Newman score nomination, and he's one of those who it's just like, again, here we go, another nomination. And
yeah,
I feel
loss.
like right, we'll talk about Disney too, but it's like I think you have Disney, when you have a Disney movie, it's like, do people take that seriously? Are they going to take it as seriously, even if it is a performance by a legend like Emma Thompson, who's been awarded before, and it's based on a real person? All of those things are there, but then you're up against the Harvey Weinstein machine. That's a hard thing at the time too.
Oh yes. And I also think maybe a problem was that she is in the kind of dreaded position of being everyone's third or fourth or fifth choice.
Yeah.
And she just didn't have enough number ones, maybe. There's more passion for the others. We kind of talked about this on A Woman Robbed, me and Luca Gilberti on that episode, and how, yes, and how, it's also such a prickly kind of character, and not always, in the most fun way. Like, kind of Meryl is kind of just hamming it up and being funny and stuff, and like, P.L. Travers in Saving Mr. Banks is very severe and prickly and difficult to sympathize with at times, so that may be part of it too, because we know how the Academy tends to feel about difficult women. So
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. CJ Crowder said, "Do you think Meryl Streep's criticism of Walt Disney at the National Board of Review Awards ceremony might have influenced the voters and led to Emma Thompson not receiving a Best Actress nomination for Saving Mr. Banks?"
This is a really interesting question, because I had completely forgotten about this, but I definitely think it's possible, especially if we think, like, if Meryl might have been in fifth. Like, that's a very savvy thing for her to do as a campaigner, I guess. And I would not be surprised if this was a Harvey Weinstein idea. Again, I'm just so cynical about everything related to that man and his campaigning. So, I mean, I guess it could have influenced voters a little bit, but I don't know how much weight it actually would have had. I think maybe compared to some of the other reasons we discussed for why she didn't get in.
I agree. And I don't really think she is a very powerful person, but I don't know if she has that much sway to make people be like, well, I was gonna vote for Emma Thompson, but now that she said this about Walt Disney, I don't know.
Now that Meryl chimed in, I'm not sure.
It's very kind of simplistic take, I think. Jonathan Howley said, "Emma Thompson has received no love from the Academy since 1995. What happened here? Is the Academy done with our beloved Emma?"
Okay, the Academy better not be done with our beloved Emma. I think we talked about like what happened really here, but I think what's hard too is that I think in another year with another distributor and release plan, festival plan, she totally could have gotten in for something like Good Luck to You, Leo Grand. Like that was one of those that I thought she completely deserved to get in for. It's a really, I think, adventurous performance and something that she just excels in too. So yeah, that was a shame. I was hoping we could get that, but I really do blame that, I think, a little bit on the release plan for that again. So I don't think we're totally done with her. I think she could also have maybe some writing in her to do too.
Yeah, definitely. I'm guessing she was maybe even top 10 a few years ago for good luck to you, Leo Grand. Like, she got BAFTA nominated, I think Globe nominated too, so she was definitely on that short list at least. So yeah, I think she still got it, but I would love to see another great screenplay from Emma too. Last question from Chelsea. Obligatory Survivor questions. Who wins? Dominates challenges? Best social game? Best strategy? Who do you want on your tribe and or take on a rewards wins? Who goes on to appear on every other reality franchise?
Wow. So
I'm so
Chelsea,
excited to have
I'm
you
ready.
on.
You know,
because usually people are guests here and they're like, I have never watched Survivor, so you take it. But I know I can count on you for this.
Oh, yeah. I'm so ready. So this was my most thorough response to all of the listener questions.
Okay.
So for dominates challenges, and I think just who I would want on my team, especially at the, let's say, pre-merge stage, like where we need to win team challenges. Ryan Stone, absolutely. She's smart. She can do endurance competitions or puzzles. And now the challenges are just all like, here's an obstacle course and you have to finish this weird puzzle. I think that really suits her skill set well.
Yeah,
so
definitely. Of this group,
she also,
especially too.
Yeah. I think she also she doubts herself, but is also a really good team player. And that energy I think is good because she's not, but I wouldn't call her paranoid, because you don't want a super paranoid person on your tribe. That would be really hard to deal with. But here's my wrinkle, and I think you and Chelsea will appreciate this. She would get a confessional about her daughter dying, which would mean that you cannot take her to the final tribal because she would win. So you've got to get rid of her somewhere right after the merge.
Yeah.
The second she loses an individual challenge, she's out of there.
Yep. Good call. Yeah.
I told you I was thorough with this.
Wow.
Then, okay, so for social game strategy, I do think that Sydney has a Parvati-like quality to her that could take her very far. She also, in the movie, sort of has a Russell and a James. Like, that's her. She has men that she can really easily manipulate and that you never really know how she feels about them. But the issue is that Parv is also such a girl's girl and had the Black Widow Brigade. Yeah. And we don't know that about Sydney because of the writing of American Hustle. So I don't know, she could have a season like Parv's Heroes versus Villains where she makes it all the way to the end and then no one understands what she was doing, aligning with Russell, and then she ends up losing.
You've really thought this out. I love it.
Here we go. Okay. So, for Violet.
Oh boy.
This is just how I think of her as a Survivor player. It's giving Sue Hawk meets.
Yes.
Right? Like Snake and the Rat, that is a total Violet
She's
monologue.
She's just truth-telling in her jury speech. Yep.
And she's waiting for that opportunity to just attack and launch all the way.
Absolutely.
So Sue Hawk meets, I would say, like Lil from Pearl Islands, who I found so annoying.
God.
And who just like cries and like I think like bends to these kind of sad stories, but you just are like, why are you still around? And then lastly, Liz from our most recent season, because I think that Liz belongs at the Weston family table. She belongs in Osage County. Like if we think of her Applebee's rant, where she just slow turns around,
like
I'm pissed. Yeah, screaming at them. She would fit right in.
Yep.
I'm still going. Still have two more things.
I love it.
I would take Philomena on every single reward. She would be coming with me to watch Treasure Island. She would be coming with me to whatever like SpawnCon, Applebee's, Chili's, Outback thing they want to do. I would always bring her. And I think having her in my tribe, though, would be my downfall because I would really want to protect her. And I think, like, when I think about older people who've played Survivor before, they did really well in the earlier seasons for the most part. You would have a couple of people who would leave fairly early, but for the most part, like, it was a was a bit different. Like Rudy made it all the way to the end.
Yeah.
But I think in the new era, it would be hard. And then for Chelsea's last part of the question of who goes on to appear in every other reality franchise, Jasmine would be so great on Traitors.
Yes. Oh my God.
Because she would have her full glam there. She could be like, here I am at the table in my red Carolina Herrera. And just all of her, I just imagine her interacting with the housewives. Like she would not pay the gamers any mind. Like if you're on Big Brother or Survivor, I feel like she wouldn't care. But
yeah,
all the housewives, they would get along. And then I think she would also do, like she's classic, person who gets fired from Real Housewives of New York because of a scandal and because they don't have money anymore. And she's disgraced. But then she gets invited to go on Real Housewives Ultimate Girls Trip where she inevitably has a breakdown.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was a tour de force.
Thank you. That's what I'm here for. Reality TV.
Well, I can hardly top that, but I'll just say a few of my thoughts from this. Okay. I think Jasmine gets voted out very early because her tribe can't stand her. And she's talking to herself and not even in confessional, just,
just out there.
Yeah.
She's peak, paranoid. So there's always a person on every season or most seasons where it's like episode 3 and all of a sudden they get voted out just because they think they're going to get voted out.
Exactly. Total self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah. I think Violet is one of those antagonistic players that somehow gets really far, but after a while they're just taken out or maybe even dragged to the end for an easy win, honestly.
Yeah.
0 vote finalist. Ryan Stone, obviously has the survival skills to do very well, but does she have the social skills? I don't know if she can fully get there necessarily. Philomena, I think, at the very least, is a fan favorite, so that counts for something. And as odd as it sounds, I think she might have the best aptitude for the game. No, she's not going to win challenges, but neither did Sandra Diaz-Twine, and she won twice, so...
Right.
So I think she has the good social game. She gets along with everybody, and she's sort of underestimated, and she makes it all the way to the end.
She could be like a Suri, too. She, I think, could have qualities like Suri.
I could see it, yeah. And, I think Sydney is someone who's going to make a lot of big moves, but then by the end just gets blindsided in the most brutal fashion, and she does not take it well.
Yeah, the one when I always think of the one when Andrea got blindsided and she just starts, she's like, what? Out loud?
Yes.
She's just so shocked. I think that would happen to Sydney.
Yeah, making a scene on her way out. Yes. And obviously challenge threat is from this group, it's Ryan Stone, and it's not even close. But Philomena checks a lot of those boxes, though. I think she has the best social game. I'd want her on my tribe. I'd take her on every reward with me, and we can have mimosas on the final day and celebrate being in the final 3.
That sounds so great.
All right. Well, on that note, let us get to our final segment here where we will discuss who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. I don't think this is super clear-cut, so excited to hear what you say here. Who do you think was the runner-up?
Yeah, it's really not clear-cut because we don't have a lot of signs, kind of like we talked about when you have a sweeper. But I think that just given the wisdom from recent years, even though she had just won not that long ago, I would go with Sandra Bullock for Gravity because this movie really, it dominated at the Oscars. It's one of those movies, I think it's up there for having the most wins without Best Picture. And whenever that happens, I think we do have to pay attention. I think that also happened with Cabaret, I believe, and Liza ended up winning there. So I think there is a possibility that it was Sandra. I think given just the performance of the other movies and not really having another clear person to coalesce around.
Okay. Very good.
That's my argument.
There's definitely a possibility of that. I am going with someone else here, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And hear me out.
Okay, I'm ready.
I think the runner-up was Amy Adams.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And here's why. I think first of all, it was always Cate in a blowout. But I do remember just from, again, doing the research, there's just a lot of chatter about whether the whole Woody Allen thing with Dylan Farrow could have hurt her chances and that it could benefit Amy Adams the most because it was such a late release and it was so on everyone's mind, American Hustle. So again, I think it was such a sweeper for Cate that like there was not many votes to be had for the other four. But considering Amy had that high profile win at the Golden Globes and American Hustle won the SAG Ensemble Award, that there was a little bit of a pocket of support potentially, plus the fact that she was the only non-winner here, that she could have been a runner-up in this race that wasn't really a race. And also I would add to the Sandra Bullock thing, Titanic got 11 wins, and I don't really think Kate Winslet was the runner-up of that particular Best Actress race necessarily, so I think acting and technicals are sometimes different when it comes to what people pick.
Yeah, and it is a totally out there, like it would be a very weird win in this category. Like I can't really think of what to compare it to. And yeah, I mean, Amy, like on paper, it does make sense. Like if you have a Golden Globe win, like where that puts you in the list.
Yeah, she was the only one on a stage.
Yeah, right. And it's just, I think it's what's so strange is like the fact that it's also possible that at the nomination stage, she could have been in 5th, right? Yeah. But then she could also be runner-up once it comes down to winner voting. What a year. That
happens. As we know, phase 1 and phase 2 can be very different. Yeah. And I'm just going to bring it up once again. 2021 has taught us that with Coda. So,
oh my God. You had to do it because I was here. I just had
to do it, because, yeah.
Well, I always think about that with like Sean Hayter and director. Like if she could have gotten in there, could that have happened? Like there's so many question marks around that with phase 2. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I would love to know who would be your winner from this lineup.
I would vote for Cate Blanchett for Blue Jasmine in a landslide. I really wouldn't have to even think about it. I think this is just a monumental performance, really. Like I said earlier, it's my favorite Best Actress win of the 2010s. I think that the performance, if you do think about it in connection to Streetcar 2, she's just giving a brand new take on the Blanche character, modernizing it. And again, I think the way that she oscillates between the Jasmine that we see on the Upper East Side, that very particular type of Upper East Side woman, to when she's in San Francisco and she's starting to just lose it. But she never goes too far. And I think that's a really, really tricky thing to do. So I happily would give my vote to Cate Blanchett.
Yes. And I would also vote for Cate Blanchett. I would feel no shame in just joining the bandwagon of that because sometimes the front runner is truly just the best of the year, and it's just undeniable to me. And this is one of those years, and it's also, as of now, I still have to do rewatches of the rest of the 2010s, but also my number 1 Best Actress win of this decade. So
I love it. You're not going 2018? I'm just kidding.
We'll see.
I can't wait to listen to that episode. See, you did Coda. I know. I had to do 2018.
Yes. Yep. Well, anyway, Sophia, thank you so much. This was another wonderful discussion with Best Actress with you. Always love talking actressing and Oscars. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Honestly, I'm honored to have been on this show 3 times to cover 3 very different actress races. I think all very fun to cover. And also just congratulations on this endeavor. This has been years long. It feels like it's, I thought about it the other day. I was like, oh my God, I went on this 3 years ago at this point to do
2021,
1937. Yeah. So you've been doing this for so long, but I also can't believe that it's almost over. And all of the guests that you've had on, I've just loved listening to every episode. I think you've just done such a great job with this series. And it really is crazy, I think, how well planned out everything really was from, the first episode all the way to now. So you should be, very proud and know that, as guests and as listeners, we all love this series and it's a bittersweet end, I think.
Oh, well, that's very nice of you to say. I really do appreciate it. And truly, my favorite part of this has just been making these connections with people and nerding out about this very niche topic that turns out to be maybe not so niche after all. So,
yeah, of course. We're all very happy to do it.
Yes, I appreciate it. Well, tell people where they can find more of you and your very busy work on the internet.
Yeah, I have quite a bit. So you can find me on Twitter at Sophia_Sim. You can find me on Letterboxd at Faye Dunaway. Yes, that is my username there. You can find my podcast, Oscar Wilde, that I co-host along with my dear friend Nick, who was also a guest on this show. If you remember Megan Fox as Precious,
Never
that is
forget.
my lovely co-host. We host a series where we go back in time, look at past Oscar history, but also discuss the current award season. So check that out wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can find my reviews, interviews, film festival coverage heading into this award season at Awards Watch as well, where I covered Telluride, New York Film Festival, and have some fun interviews coming out very soon.
Very good. Very excited to see all of your success as well.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
So thank you all so much for listening. You can find me on all platforms at Kevin_Jacobson. Shows that Oscar runner-up on Twitter, Instagram, and the runner-up is. Rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you liked what you heard, go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup is, where you can hear a whole bunch of bonus episodes. Next week, we'll be breaking down the Best Actress lineup of 2014, where the nominees were Marion Cotillard in 2 Days, One Night, Felicity Jones in The Theory of Everything, Julianne Moore in Still Alice, Rosamund Pike in Gone Girl, and Reese Witherspoon in Wild, with the winner being Julianne Moore. So with that, thanks again, Sophia.
Yeah, thank you.
And I will bid you all adieu.